Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hello and welcome to the Pylon Show, coming to you from a strange planet on a distant world. My name, of course, is Creighton Olson. I'm going to be your guest host for the Pylon Show today. I got three fantastic guests on the line as well. Neuro, Katz, and Florencio are all joining me today. I don't know if you guys want to say hello yet. It's weird because you're not on camera, but I've got you on voice, so it feels like I'm talking to myself at an insane asylum right now.
Oh, I'm here. I'm just burrowed. What's up?
I'm here.
See, I got the guys.
What's going on?
So if you're watching at home, be a little, here's what's happening. We got This Week in StarCraft to start things off. So we're going to go through all 30-odd tournaments that have happened this week and the things that are coming up. Florencio, Katz, Neuro going to join in, chime in whenever they can, but hopefully they'll be probably muted and hanging out for a while. Once we finish This Week in StarCraft, we're going to take a short break and then hop into the main Pylon Show after that. So then we got a lot of great discussions, including what could possibly be the greatest GSL Finals we've ever seen in the history. I'm shitting, it was terrible. Let's talk about This Week in StarCraft. So as you guys know, every week we come forward with some topics from the Templar archives. We start with three or four events that are big news, and we've got the usual four up here: the ESL Open Cups, GSL Finals, the ASL, and of course the DreamHack StarCraft 2 Masters, which is coming up here very soon. ESL Open Cups, these are all from last week, actually. So really quickly, the ESL Open Cup Korea, number 69, Nice. The best one, surprisingly not won by the player Nice, which is a little disappointing. Solar and Cure actually took the finals this week, where Solar took out Cure in the grand finals. It was 3-0, I think. 3-0? Yeah, 3-0 there for Solar. So a good win for Solar, who finally gets one on the board after losing to Cure a couple weeks ago. The revenge. The ESL EU Open Cup, again, the Clem Weekly. He's won 4 in a row now, defeating Shadown this week, 3-0 for a little French trial by combat there. And the North American ESL Open Cup, again, number 69, happening with DRG and Zest making their way to the grand finals. DRG beating Zest 3-1. And I always like to check, how far did North America actually get here?
So Zest is a usual suspect in who knocks me out. I'm playing in these on Mondays, the America's Opens.
Okay.
It's really fun.
How'd you do this time?
So it generated a really important meme. He used 2 oracles and put stasis traps like just above the ramp into my main, and then sent in 4 carriers to my main, and I had like 15 queens derping out below the ramp. And right after that moment, a nice viewer just raided in, a small raid, maybe 6 to 15 people, says, "Hey, Neuro, how's it going?" And I'm actively looking at these carriers and the oracles just completely destroying me in a very technical way that makes me feel dumb. I was like, I don't need to tell you how I'm doing. Look at this.
Just gaze upon my destruction.
Yeah.
Dude, that's memey. So it was stasis ward at the top of your ramp and that caught 2 of your queens?
Yes, let me see
and
if I can
all the rest off.
the clip for you here. It might take a minute.
Oh, dude, that's sick. What a pro play. That's so annoying. Damn. But I feel like surely it feels better if Zest beats you and then goes on to almost win the whole thing, right? Then you feel better about like, well, okay, maybe he's a decent player.
He's an amazing player, and he, like, the interaction between someone like me who's mid GM to someone who's a GSL champion, it really illustrates the amount of skill you can have in StarCraft 2. And that's its own like cool demonstration to see. So a lot of viewers, they'll say, "Have you ever played against the top pros?" You can just watch me get my ass kicked by Zest and see the difference. I can play like my best against him and I will still lose. I played against Parting on ladder and I stopped his cannon rush, and I felt like I was victorious for the rest of the day. I didn't win the macro game after that, but he went cannons into Void Ray, Disruptor, Sky Toss. But I defended the cannon rush, and that's such a huge moral victory that you can't feel bad about it. These guys have like 10 years of StarCraft on me, so it's all good.
Oh yeah,
it reminds. Go ahead.
I got crushed by Parting in KR and Korea. That was pretty terrible. He got me good.
Reminds me of I used to play board games with a bunch of guys who were electrical engineers, so they're just like light years smarter than I am, and they would always give me an alternate win condition. So they'd be like, "We'll win if we actually win the game, but if Creighton gets to like this, mediocre midpoint, then we'll all consider that we've all lost the game because he's so much worse than we are." I feel like we need something like that. GSL Code S season finals. We're going to talk about this a little later, but Rogue and Maru played each other, and it was explosive. Oh my god, tasteless. Yikes! Yeah, we got a lot of discussion to hold about that a little bit later. Luckily, the ASL, the Brood War Star League, StarCraft League, Africa TV StarCraft League Season 11, starting the round of 8 here pretty quick. With we got our 8 players sorted out. It's Mini, Best, JYJ, Hero, Snow, Larva, and Rush in the round of 8. Obviously, cast by some fellows you might recognize. So check that one out when you're able to. This is the big news of the week. Actually, we got about 13 slides here that I'm just going to zip through. But DreamHack Summer Masters 2021 qualifiers are like happening soon, May 11th and 12th. That's next week, man. DreamHack Summer from July 1st to 4th, and it's 50 grand. So this is going to be a huge deal. And like I said, we got a bunch of slides here about who all has qualified already, who's on the way. You'll want to take a look at this. You can type !notes in the chat to follow along on the show notes with me, because the show notes are great. If you guys can't see, like, it cuts off on my screen, but I've got little links on the bottom to all the Liquipedia, Twitters, Twitches, Discords, like everything you need for these. So we'll sort of buzz through the DreamHack StarCraft 2 Masters, because I feel like you're going to hear a lot about it on the Pylon Show in the coming weeks. So this first slide here, we got Korea. We got there are 4 spots available for the people in the GSL round of 8. So 4 of those people, the 4 players who got 5th through 8th, will compete for 2 remaining spots. And so Hurricane Bunny, Inno, and Armani. 2 of those guys are going to move on to DreamHack, get a seeded spot. Same with similar with Asia, 8 players in 2 groups for a dual tournament format. And then here's Oceania, again, dual tournament format. Just a couple of slots in Oceania. North America is also going to be 16 players in 2 groups of 8 for the round robin. So there's a lot of games there to be played. This is the format we've seen previously. I think nothing different, really. They adjusted, and maybe you guys know better than I do, but they adjusted the number of slots, I think, in some of the regions, like a tiny bit, but nothing super new here in DreamHack. And then Europe, obviously 32 players in 4 groups of 8. Tons of action. Sure, that'll all be cast on the DreamHack ESL StarCraft 2 channel. And Latin America with 8 players, a couple of them moving on. Same with China, 8 players, a couple of them moving on. And that's DreamHack. Again, we sort of buzzed through that. We'll talk a little more about that once the tournament's underway, I'm sure. Olimo League, still going on here every week like clockwork. Nightmare, taking out Nice, 3-1 in the weekly. And then the April monthly, which every month there's like a big super tournament with these guys. Beyond taking that one 4-1 over Zest. So beating Zest, you never know how good that is until you've seen the games. Sometimes that's a big win, and sometimes that's just Zest being Zest. NA Ladder Heroes is back with Mio Micah reclaiming his rightful throne, taking out, I think Trigger was in there last week, and Trigger's now fallen to 3rd place with Neens in the middle there. So Mio Micah, the best NA StarCraft player in the history of NA StarCraft.
Did you know that Singapore is actually in North America?
You mean like geographically?
Apparently. I always get him in on Singapore server. It's pretty fun.
I'm trying to think back to like my geography lessons with continental drift in like 10 million years. Is Singapore going to be closer to North America or further away? I think it's closer, right? Because the Pacific plate and like the North American plate are like bumping up against each other. Mm-hmm. I forget how that works. Somebody call Bill Bryson. He'll sort us out.
I'm just venting about ping. It's all good.
Sentimiento Latino, of course, the all Latin America tournament with some familiar faces as always. I feel like every week it's Jim Rising, Paco Mike, and the Zerg Lord. Shakti, a new name in the quarterfinals, but Paco Mike taking out Jim Rising 3-2. Battle of the Americas with South America. No, Mexico is technically North America. Never mind. North America. No, it's North America versus Latin America. Sorry, not North and South. So South America and Latin America winning again here with Jim Rising over Ryan. I think Neens won last week. So see, Pili Pili won this week. Jim Rising won last week. I think Neens won the week before. So that title getting traded back and forth, man, for a long time here with North America and Latin America. The Copa Hyperion returns, and again, familiar faces there. It's the exact same bracket, man. Jim Rising versus Fate. Oh no, hang on. Jim Rising versus Shakti, and Paco Mike versus the Zerg Lord. Jim Rising versus Shakti, and Ryu versus the Circle Lord, because Paco Mike's not in this one. Man, those tournaments are all looking a little similar, but it's good that we're giving the Latin American crew a couple more tournaments to play in. Amontes de StarCraft, another one going down. Terran defeated Eric 4-2. This is for Brazilian players only. And this last one was in memory of one of their community members, Tag, who just passed away. So good to see them honoring one of their community members, and good win there for Terran over Eric. The CSO Cup, this has been going now for 16 weeks. A lot of good players starting to join up here. Cass taking out Hopped in the finals, 3-2. And then CSO Contender, which is a very similar thing, just with slightly lower league players, bronze to diamond with Matrix over E-Legacy. The OSC King of the Hill Weekly. Look at these photos, man. Look at these photos. B and Vanya finishing the week off. This looks like last week's results as well. This is going to be streamed back on my channel starting on Sunday. So Chicken Man's been holding this fort down for me for a while, or holding this fort rather for a while for me, and I'll be picking it back up on Sunday. The Friends of StarCraft League. This is this really cool Filipino StarCraft League with the friends and family of Carl JG into the semifinals now. Pardon me, the grand finals rather, with their code A and their code B. The player names have just been phenomenal, man. Neutrophil losing to Very Cool, and Dark Menace taking out Regret. I love it. That was the third place match for Code S. And then Code A was Spaghetti-O over Criminal. And of course, another Carl JG event with the Psystorm StarCraft League for Jumi. He beat Bistork and will be going to the finals to face Ender for Jumi, who I know is very young, but I'm always struck by how young he looks in his portraits. He just has that middle school vibe about him, and I love it. The Magikarp Masters Cup 26, again every week here, with Captain Canuck leading the cast, with Sumika taking out William Outlaw for that $15 prize. The Alpha X Junior Championships. This is, of course, the new format for the AX Junior Championships, with Araj Fire, Poppy, Yen Yakov, and Ghosty in the semifinals. This will be real good, guys. If you guys watch any StarCraft, these are names you see, at least Araj Fire and Poppy. You see these guys in like normal ass tournaments, and they're all under 17 years old. Yakov as well, just does crazy good. He made it through the qualifiers in my last tournament. It's going to be a scary grand finals for these guys. The Legion Cup bi-weekly on May 8th. That's here in 2 days. Coming up on, let's see, that'll be today's Thursday, so Saturday, May 8th. Sign up at the code below, and that's streamed on Dave Testa LGN. Wardy's Spring Championship finally into the bracket stages. The group stages took a long ass time, but we finally have the best of the best here. 3 Terrans clogging up the winners round 1, with Cure taking out Clem 3-2 in that first winners round. The Clem Rainer dream is so real, guys, in the lower bracket. It's so real. I love it. I love it. All right, the World Team League, of course, continuing to crack on. This weekend, by the way, is the break week for the World Team League. So we've had six rounds already. This weekend is off, and then the break week is this weekend. And then after that, is round 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Here are the standings after 6 series. Weirdly, the Africa Freaks in first place because your overall match score doesn't matter at all in the World Team League. It's points, and then it's map delta. So that's why the Africa Freaks are in first place, despite having a worse match score than Team NV. With Kaitzi and, Shopify and Liquid just fighting over that 5th place spot. Remember, in the World Team League, only the top 5 teams move on to the playoffs. So once you get 6th through 12th, you're out, man. You're out. The Alpha X tournaments this week, as always. The crew over at the Dragons putting on a lot of content. Ultimate Showdown is round robin in the playoffs. So Ragnarok and Jaun getting driven out of those round robin matches with Björn, Creator, Armani, and Cure. Oh, something's wrong here. It says Björn, Jaun, Cure, and Creator in the round of 4. So maybe those scores for Group B aren't quite right. Anyway, check out the Liquipedia page and you can see who's going down in the Ultimate Showdown. Alpha X show matches, of course, continue every single week. Parting over Björn, 5-4. Good win for Parting, the big boy there. He struggled a bit the last couple weeks. Good to see him taking out Björn in an honest 9-game best of 9. The Alpha X Some Drunk Canadians Brawlers Club is back with looks like Joan getting a real nice result there with 3-0 over Innovation, Beyond, and Armani. Wow. Nice stuff there. Cast by Alpha X, Some Drunk Canadian, and if you are Korean, cast by Inu from the Into the clan. The Siege Perilous we talked about last week. Championship of Russia, the official tournament held by the Russian Federation of Esports. Dude, I feel like the Russian translations for events always sound way cooler than anything else. Like the Russian, if this was an English language event, it'd just be, ESL or whatever. But the Russian Federation of Esports, it just sounds
the
like
Russian Federation of Esports.
That's how I hear it in my head every time. Thank you so much. I was going to say it needs like a fanfare, but that clip is perfect. And the ESL ANZ Champs qualifiers beginning next week. So check it out for all those Australian players who've qualified in. Some Drunk Canadians food-based tournament back again on Saturday. Geralt taking out Hopped in the last one. Geralt, handsome, hungry. Big mansion behind him there. And the other food-based tournament here, we've got Estrella taking out Vindicta. And that means Estrella moves up to 5 pizzas. Wow, good work for him. Every other Sunday. So I think that was last Sunday. It'll be back, not this Sunday, but the next one. And then obviously the news that we're all really excited about this week, guys. And I don't want to overstate this, but since this game was such a big part of my childhood, obviously the entire StarCraft 2 community has been on fire with the announcement that Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego has joined the World Video Game Hall of Fame. I played the crap out of that game. And I'm sad that Broderbund Software is gone now because that was the best experience. The best crime-solving experience I've ever had as a middle school child. It's phenomenal. My mom didn't let me play fun games. So, like, I had to play educational games. And Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego taught me all about, like, basically racist geography facts about various countries.
I vaguely remember Carmen Sandiego. I hear that name and I think, yes, that was a thing that some people did.
Oh, dude. So Carmen Sandiego has a genuinely special place in my life because I'm way into acapella, and the theme song for the show of Carmen Sandiego was sung by the most famous acapella group of the time called Rockapella. And that's like I knew of all their work through Carmen Sandiego, and then I played the game a crap ton as well. Nice. Very excited.
What about Boys to Men though? Weren't they more famous? And I've never heard of Rockapella.
Is Boys to Men actually an a cappella group? They have like backing tracks and stuff, right?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Not that they're not great, because Boys to Men is fantastic.
They have a cappella songs, though.
Yeah, they do have a few. You're correct.
Okay.
So aside from the Carmen Sandiego news, we'll move on to... this is still StarCraft 2. Dang. Another Brazilian tournament with qualifiers yesterday and on Sunday, with some qualified players and some invited players cast by Cosmos. We got the Psystorm Esports Network King of the Hill. Wow, this is new. I saw Wardy tweeting about this one with 5 players doing a King of the Hill sort of thing. This looks really, really cool. Really cool. So check this one out over on Wardy TV, and it looks like Chicken Man going to be casting as well. Interesting stuff. Yeah, check out the TL page about that. It'll be interesting stuff. See, Alpaca talk show with Vindicta and the best beard in StarCraft, Disc. They're on episode 3 now. Again, that came out a while ago, so I think that's from last week. CSO Invitational, we've talked about, and there we go. Big news at the end of the show. The Team Liquid Star League, of course, coming up very soon. Qualifiers already wrapping up. We got a couple qualifiers left. Korea was today. We got EU and the America qualifiers on Saturday. It's shaping up to be just a fabulous event. Excited to see the talent announcements and what they've got up their sleeves. TSL always does something fun, man. They're always fun. GSL Super Tournament obviously finished. The qualifiers finished up. I just casted those yesterday from replay. If you want to see them, they're on my Africa TV page. And oh man, Innovation versus Solar Game 2, 30-minute game. Both players end the game on like 5 supply. Holy shit, it was sick. It was so good. That was the standout game. Everything else was more or less pretty average, but that game worth the rewatch. Of course, the tournament actually starts on the 17th and cast over on Africa TV or YouTube rather, with the usual crew. The next StarCraft 2 Masters Season 1 happening now, of course. Qualifiers going on. Another big event to look forward to. This summer is going to be jam-packed with events, guys. Just jam-packed. We talked about this last week. We move on to Brood War. Bombastic Star League. We talked about this last week. Looks like a couple groups have gone through. And the Bombastic Gosu League, which is another league from Bombastic Star League, with a ton of players here. Damn, I didn't know this many people still played StarCraft Brood War.
Whoa. Isn't that almost all Protoss?
Yeah, it is. There's like 4 Zerg on there, 5 Zerg. Oh, okay, there's a few more than that, actually. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 Zerg. So out of 32 players, that's actually about right. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, only 5 Terran. That's what it is. Okay.
I used to play with some of these guys. If you go to the previous or next screen, October Zerg, I think the Macedonian Zerg won, right?
Yeah, in Group E.
Yeah, we used to call him Mustache Zerg. But this was when people didn't have mustaches because we were so young.
And so he had a mustache when he was like 12 years old or something?
Something like that, yeah. So we called him Mustache Zerg. But yeah, now probably all of these guys have mustaches if they want them. So kind of irrelevant now, but yeah.
Was it an impressive mustache, or was it just that he had it when he was so young, and it was one of those growth,
he had exactly, yeah. I think that's what it was.
Where it looks like a mustache died on your upper lip, and you're still like trying to,
something like that, yeah.
Mustache, I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, Brood War G's Weekly. Speaking of mustache Zerg, look at that, October Zerg losing to Bishop in the grand finals. Bishop, by the way, has been tearing through this tournament last couple of weeks. He's been doing like deep runs as a random player, which is insane. Very cool. The best of the best finished up. We talked about that last week. The show match looks like we haven't had any updates yet. Poor foreign players getting just steamrolled in week 1 by Sorry Rush, Action, and Snow. They tried. And the Hunter 3v3 has proceeded on to the round of 4 now with our Equipa team, Kala, Soul Gaming, and Bull. Ultimate Battle event, just as Flash leaves for military service. This was last week, so again, we've already seen that. And the Caster Muse Nautic Star League featuring, oh my god, no wonder Artosis can't host today. He's busy practicing for Group D of the Nautic Star League with Hyuk, DeWalt, and Bishop. Pretty tough group for Artie there. He's gonna struggle to get out of there. But oh man, congrats to him for getting through. He and DeWalt. I like that they scrambled both the foreigners into the same group because they were like, you both can't get out of here. Don't deserve it. Doesn't seem random. Whoa, ladies, Africa StarCraft League Season 10. Female only StarCraft 1 League. That's exciting. This is new, actually. This definitely looks like the advertisement for local bars like Ladies Night. Ladies drink free or whatever. This definitely looks like the same color scheme I've seen at 3 or 4 bars for that. Into the round of 4 now with Duxon, Toss Girl, Darren, and Senna. Poor Protoss players getting left in the dust in that one. Yikes. The New Worlds map contest, we talked about it last week. ASL Tastosis casting, of course, we talked about it last week, but look at those handsome nerds. Look at that Patreon, guys. It's beautiful. Go support Artie and Tasty. Casting the ASL. And that's it for discussion topics. Sorry, guys, that was a real long this week in StarCraft. There's just a ton going on this week in StarCraft, so a lot to talk about. And sorry to Neuro, Cats, and Florencio, guys. Not a lot to really interact with you there in the This Week in StarCraft. But don't worry, friends at home. You're not just going to hear me drone on for the entire series. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take a pretty short break while we swap over to our next set of discussion topics. And then I'm going to be joined by Neuro, Cats, and Florencio. And we've got a lot to talk about. GSL Finals, other big tournaments going on this week. And then the reason we brought some of the biggest wrinkle brains in StarCraft on is because we're going to talk about cheese this week, which is a very important topic. And I think it's fair to say quite timely. It's funny, we decided on this topic before the GSL Finals was played, because I was like, oh, Max Packs just won a big tournament. We've seen a couple cheesy things happening in the past, and then the GSL Finals happened, and I was like, good, we chose the right topic for this week. So we're going to be talking about that after that. Guys, give me a quick break, a couple minutes on the clock, and when we come back, I'll be joined by my actual guests here live on camera, Neuro, Katz, and Florencio, and we're going to talk about the GSL Grand Finals, other tournaments this week, some cheese, and then, of course, doing your viewer questions. So stick around for the actual Pylon show coming up after this. All right, boys and girls, welcome back. Welcome back to the Pylon Show. Again, I'm Creighton Olsen, guest hosting the event today, and I am joined by three of the biggest wrinkly brains in all of StarCraft. Let's do a proper intro now that you guys have sat through half an hour of this week in StarCraft. I'm joined first and foremost by Neuro. Neuro, how are you, my friend? How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. It's springtime here in Seattle, so there are leaves on the trees, which means I can't see my neighbors, and that's beautiful.
Are your neighbors like attractive, or do you not look at them that often? You just don't want to see them?
Well, I think
how much creeping are you doing is what I'm asking.
I have a nice little nature preserve outside the window, so there are a lot of creatures out there, frogs that are communicating in the evenings. They're very loud. Occasionally, you'll hear a squirrel get murdered by an owl late in the night. So it's interesting and exciting.
What does that sound like? Glad I have.
That owl's working away at it. Nature is violent.
Dude, you gotta save those impressions. Oscar season isn't like coming up for another couple of months. You gotta hold that off until the autumn so you can be considered. That was impressive. Neuro, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it. Spring in Seattle sounds absolutely lovely. I'm also joined right below me by Root Katz. Katz, we have worked together more in the last 3 weeks than ever before. I feel like every time I'm online, I'm doing something with you. How have you been the last couple of weeks?
Great. Working with you, Creighton. How else could I be? I've been doing fantastic, and yeah, chilling.
Very glad you're joining us, man. And our final guest today, somebody I haven't had the pleasure of talking to too much before this, Florencio, joining us as well. Florencio, how are you?
Hi, pretty good. I'm over here in Los Angeles, California. It's starting to get hot, so
the frogs they're being mummified on the pavement rather than being eaten by owls.
What?
Does that not happen in LA? That happens in Kansas all the time. Like a frog will hop on the sidewalk and like get stuck to it or something, and then just like dry out like a husk of a frog.
I haven't seen a frog in California in a long time. You know, the closest place I saw one was like a swamp kind of location I went to as a kid. I used to go like an hour to get there just to collect little small frogs, take them home. It was crazy. Weird, but yeah. So that happened.
Collecting frogs, but then you became a Protoss player?
Yeah. I should have been a Zerg at that point, huh? Yeah. That was like the closest thing to a Ling.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that'd be the case, yeah.
Yeah. I just like exotic animals, I guess.
I've never thought of frogs as too exotic, but I guess if they're not around too often, it makes sense.
Exotic is relative to where you are. Because there are a lot of creatures that are super standard in a region, and then you go somewhere else. I was hearing from Apoptosis, who's visiting here for a week. They don't have squirrels in Hawaii. So
my God.
A Hawaiian person who's never been to the mainland will see a squirrel and get their phone out and be like, oh, shit, a squirrel. And we're all like, squirrels are everywhere. They're a nuisance.
It sounds like I remember when I went to undergraduate in Nashville, Tennessee, and it was the same thing with snow, where if it snowed in Nashville, the excitement thing would be you'd go out onto the quad and wait for the kids from Texas to like look out their windows and then come onto the quad in the snow, and they'd be like making snow angels and trying to throw a snowball, and there's the snow's not even sticking to the ground. They're just like losing their minds. It was amazing. Something I thought was so boring that they just found incredible. It was delightful. Well, guests, I'm so glad you're all here. Guys, thanks for joining us. We got a really fun show. Should have plenty to talk about today. Because as you guys saw, not only from this week in StarCraft, but just sort of from what's been going on, if you guys' calendars are anything like mine, they've just been lit up for weeks and weeks with a ton of stuff happening in StarCraft 2. And we're going to cover some of the highlights, I think, starting out with the GSL preview. Did all three of you get the chance to catch the GSL either this morning or on VODs. Neuro, starting with you.
Nope, I was up late and then up early getting brunch with mom because she's in town selling the house. What happened?
Nice. slightly more important than the GSL VODs. Well, you're gonna get spoiled, I'm afraid. Cats, have you checked him out yet?
Sadly, yes. Yeah, I watched live.
Florencio?
You watched it, sadly?
I was doing a
I watched it
16.
sadly. Yeah.
I was doing a 16-hour stream, so I kind of had just enough time to go to sleep and get on here.
Okay, well, Neuro and Florencio, we're about to ruin the rest of your day. Cats and I will tell you all about it. So if those of you in chat haven't seen it yet, you're about to get spoiled. Just you're not going to get anything new, so be ready. Cats, do you want to tell the people? Just give them like a 30-second overview of the absolute mess that was Rogue versus Maru a few hours ago.
Yeah. So Rogue went roaches all but I think one game, and he won all but one game. Though he didn't. That doesn't paint the picture quite accurately because he actually won the non-roach game as well. I thought Maru played really poorly, to be honest. He lost 2 command centers without lifting off against the attack up.
Just burned
and
down.
He also lost his entire third mineral line to a slow Baneling run by. Which you just, and it was so bad because it was like 8 Banelings or something. So it should be 8 wasted Banelings. But instead it was an entire mineral line wiped. So yeah, it was a pretty bad finals, I want to say. I didn't think Maru played particularly well.
Actually, I saw that one. I thought yesterday was today, so I must have watched it after it happened. Because I saw the last 3 games. Yeah, the slow Baneling run by to the SCVs.
Yep.
Oh, that was horrible.
It was straight up Bronze League Heroes nonsense right there.
I can almost hear someone in chat saying, that never happens in my Platinum games.
Yeah. I was like, where's the sensor tower? Yeah.
How happy would you be if you did a slow Baneling run by at a GMNA level and it connected onto every SCV at your opponent's third?
30 SCVs.
It would feel like making a video that took you 10 minutes and getting 1 million views. Like you put forth so little effort and you got a massive payout.
Or like doing a hot tub stream on Twitch.
You can do a lot. I'm working on a skit regarding hot tubs.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen very often, especially at that level, much less at the finals, right? It's supposed to be the 2 best players.
Yeah.
Ideally, so yeah.
Yeah, Maru didn't appear to have showed up to play. So the final score, of course, was Rogue 3, Maru 1. Rogue 4, Maru 1 in that best of 7. And really just, I feel like at this point it's a meme that GSL finals are a little disappointing. I can't remember the last really great one we had. There have been a few that have been all right, but we seem to get in these GSL finals just really disappointing games overall. Yeah. The whole broadcast for the GSL was like 2 hours, maybe, for a best of 7, which was insane.
Yeah, it doesn't help that Rogue is Rogue as well. So Rogue usually seems to have to fall into that pattern where if he finds something that he likes, he just does it over and over and over and over. So, he mixed up the Roach openers in that they weren't exactly all the same timing, but he did a couple of 1-1 timings.
Right.
When it made sense. And then he did an earlier timing. That's the one that he failed.
Yeah.
Game 4, yeah.
And then he went for Roaches again. And then finally, he didn't go Roaches when Maru opened Double Cloak Banshee, which just makes sense not to go Roaches, right? So,
yeah.
He is also
that game, right?
He won that game, I think. No?
Yeah, he won that game with Mutus, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Isn't he historically maybe the strongest best of 7 player in StarCraft 2? He just doesn't really lose best of 7s.
There were a lot of memes before the series about that. Sorry, go ahead, Cats.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. At least in Korea, I think he hasn't lost. Or he was like 10-0 or something before Maru, and Maru was like, "Oh, you haven't played me." Yeah, it's a little bit weird to think about because sample size is so small. But yeah, like to call him strongest rather than like he's obviously one of the best players to have ever played the game. But I think if you were to have him play 10 consecutive best of sevens, he would definitely lose one. It's not like he's unbeatable in best of sevens. It's just that, it's the sample size is small enough, I think, that he hasn't lost in a best of seven in a while. Yeah.
I saw somebody comparing to the anti-Sue, where it's just when he gets to the grand finals, he just wins for some reason. He just like powers up, goes Super Saiyan in the final best of sevens every time.
I don't want to take too much of the momentum from our conversation about cheese, but one of the things that Rogue does really well and Dark does too, and even Maru has done this, is playing really vicious when you could play a beautiful, amazing macro game against this opponent, and it would be pretty back and forth. You stand a good chance of winning, but they have this killer instinct, especially with each other when they know each other's strategies, and they can kind of tell that based on how these previous matches went, I think they're going to cut corners this next game. And then you just go for a super early attack. And if you repeat the attack multiple times, the viewers usually aren't as excited the subsequent times. It's like when a cheese comes out of nowhere, that's when it's a big hype moment. But if you, like, he's hitting a 1-1 roach timing multiple times, it's not quite as exciting because he basically found an opening that he can consistently hit and collect wins.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see it too in the way that it played out, because at least from my perspective, and obviously Maru's 1,000 times better, but we have to talk about it, right? So Maru, that is, didn't seem to handle roaches that well. Like, he would not be defensive very much. He would rather be aggressive sometimes. Like, he had this push where he was sieged up with 2 tanks on Oxide near the third of Rogue, and he was pushing in with a bio ball and those tanks. But clearly there was more roaches on the side of Rogue than he could handle eventually, at least from my perspective. Yeah. And so he was going to get pushed back and he was going to get reset and both tanks were going to die. So he picks up and leaves. But from the beginning, almost it seemed like he was being more aggressive than he needed to be. This is something that in the tournament that I hosted, that I'm sure we'll talk about later, like we criticized somewhat Clem for as well, right? It seems like a lot of these pros like maybe forgot how to play against roaches, or it's just not very common to see at that level, I guess. So, but yeah, for me, roaches, you just gotta sit back and wait until your army becomes bigger because they don't scale well, right?
Yeah, the roach max out is going to be worse than the Terran max out.
Yeah, I just started recently learning Terran, and that's one of my biggest is the roach push or just the bailing bus run throughs. I was kind of looking at Morrow to see what does he do different, and I was quite surprised. He didn't look like he had the answer, but yeah, like Kat said, I think he went too early on the pressure, and that just slowed him down, and it caused him to back away, and Rogue just kept going and getting the momentum. So,
no question. I wanted to ask Kat specifically, because obviously the GSL Finals is one of those cool series because the players can prepare for it. They've got like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something where they know who their opponent's going to be. They can get prepped for it. It looked like Maru had like prepared for something entirely different from Rogue. It looked like he wasn't expecting this sort of weird these roach timings at all. Is that sort of the vibe you got, that maybe Maru had watched a lot of film from Rogue and been like, okay, he's probably going to go for these like this build, or this build, and then just completely missed it with his preparation?
It's very likely. I mean, you have to assume that they're preparing until they're doing good against what they think they're going to play against, right? So, yeah, if he had asked like any top Korean Circ player for a practice, and they told him you go roach for a roach 1-1 timing, and then he came into the series against Rogue and looked like that. I mean, the difference can't be that big between, say, Rogue and Dark executing on the same strategy, right? Like, a lot of it is the choice of strategy at that level as well. Like, I really like the roach push on Blackburn, for example. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah,
because he killed the rocks, right? So it opened up the map a lot, and that's where roaches can thrive, because tank fire is not going to be super effective. And bio in general, because there's smaller units, right? The Marines and the roaches, you can fit more in a smaller space. So the tighter the space, the better it is for bio versus roaches. And the more open, the better it is for roaches, because they all get to fire and they don't get splashed from the tank. So on Blackburn, it was brilliant, but the fact that it worked on all the other maps too, that was kind of And on Blackburn also, if he had prepared, like if he had anticipated, because that was the second or third map. I think it was the third map. I'm not sure. It was like, it was like a repeat scenario. So Maru could have also prepared by, say, taking his third base north instead of the triangle.
Right.
Because the triangle is where there's a wide open space. And then you could take the fourth on the triangle with a PF instead. And then the roaches would come in and fight an extra PF if they want to fight in the open. So I don't know. Yeah, he looked unprepared, I guess.
I was really surprised that he took that triangle base on Blackburn. It seems like only Zerg should be taking that base really to get their creep going. It was strange. Go ahead.
I think usually the idea is Terran is usually the aggressor. So the triangle third gives them a staging point for their attack. But in this case, the 1/1 roaches is definitely the aggressor, right? They're gonna be attacking first. So you want to be further away if you're the defender, basically.
I don't play roaches at all in ZVT. Right now I'm opening with the safety Bane Nest and then either going into Lingbane Hydra for Hive Tech or Lingbane Muta. So roaches, it's an entirely different dynamic where you're the one who knocks, as opposed to Lingbane Muta, you're trying to get as many drones as you can and then max out consistently and do Bane run by and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's sort of more Neuro. You'd say that's more standard, probably at the higher levels of play right now. At least on the ladder, is like what more people are going for the safety Baneling Nest opening.
Yeah, the roach opening, it feels like you're behind against Bio unless you're hitting timings with it. The Roach Warren is really secure if you're against Heckbat timings, and then they go into mech. The Roach Warren feels better, but if you open up with the wrong like Baneling Nest or Roach Warren, it feels like you're a little bit behind.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, that had to be something Rogue was absolutely prepping for. I think the surprising thing is not just that he went for this Roach build, especially the +1/+1 Roach builds, but the surprising thing is that he did it 4 games in a row. Like he did it until he lost with it, which I think is something we don't see a whole lot, especially in the GSL. I feel like GSL competitions, I'm more likely to see players showing off 2 or 3 different builds that they've all prepared, whereas just went for the same thing over and over again.
If I can borrow the poker terminology of table image, you think about what a StarCraft player specializes in and where they're comfortable. So I would describe myself as a backfoot player, where I'm the most comfortable trying to shoot for a drone lead and a production lead over my opponent and just like get a ton of creep. Because I like playing that way, and if someone stream cheats, they still have to play out the match against me. Maru, I see as a front foot player, where he's in his comfort zone when he's the one who's agitating his opponent, doing multi-prong drops and stuff like that. So by Rogue playing roaches against him, he's stealing the initiative. And he's preventing Maru from playing the kind of game that he wants to play, which is a really key essence in taking the victory from your opponent. And one of the things that Florencio and I talked about at one of the BlizzCons in his amazing Nexus hat is the inspiration from chess of doing some zany shit to take someone's queen, which oftentimes you invest so much into taking that queen that a lot of people would say it's technically bad, but the player who lost the queen feels uncomfortable and they're not getting to play the game that they wanted to play. And that's a big part of what She's is and what just being aggressive can afford you.
Neuro, I'm sure you just said something really important and interesting, but I didn't hear a word of it. I'm so sorry. Distracted by the noise and also Florencio's new headgear. Florencio, that's delightful.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm actually working on a new one, just to let you know. It's a Zealot mask that I want to wear once I finish.
Nice.
Pretty cool.
That's very cool. Dang. What's that made out of, Florencio?
Right now it's made out of like a plaster, so I can scrape and etch it, so I can refiberglass it and then create it more lightly. So I want to make a whole helmet and then put like eventually like the whole half part of a Zealot, so I can cast their stream just here and there. That would be cool cosplay.
Dude, that's sick. That's sick. That's so cool.
So did you hear table image? Is that where it left off?
Yeah, I was about to say
table image.
We're talking about table image and how Rogue was sort of playing on the trying to stop Maru from being the front foot player that you know him as.
Yeah. If I had to guess, the kind of match that Maru would want against Rogue is Rogue reaching for a 4th base and Maru has Medivac submarines shooting at it. That's when he's deciding the tempo, he's contesting his opponent's next base, and he's like directing the flow and deciding where the battles are fought. By Rogue going for a roach timing, who cares about a 4th base? Maybe he doesn't even get a 4th base. There's no 4th base to attack, so Maru has to think defensively, which is not how he wants to think. He wants to think aggressively.
The only time I really ever see Mario going defensively is when he's already behind on like 3 bases and trying to take his own 4th base and then set up tank lines to defend that and sort of play back a little bit. So I think you make a really good point that Rogue throws him off his game a little bit. Absolutely. I mean, Rogue just, from what I can tell, Rogue just out-prepared Maru for this one, which is not what I would have expected. I mean, they're both, I expect them both to prepare really well for this, and it just seems like Maru got caught so far off guard. Katz, anything else you saw in the GSL finals that was unexpected, surprising, aside from some of the stuff we've already talked about? Is there anything else that, like, I think the big focus is going to be, oh my God, the big takeaway is Roaches, Rogue, an unexpected 4-1. Is there something we sort of missed that like might have fallen through the cracks that you think we should be looking at as well?
I don't know that there was any particular like amazing game or anything like that for my taste. I thought it was a disappointing finals. I mean, I was doing some commentary. I thought on the game in Blackburn, Maru could have maybe had some of those tanks that he had on the high ground on the low ground, so that they could be shelling away at the units as they came in.
He had like 3 sieged up in his main base, didn't he?
Yeah, which was great. Like, I'm sure if you looked at those siege tank kill counts, they would be great, right? Because every time that Rogue pushed past the defenses of Maru, he ran into those siege tanks for a while. But the problem is you're running into those siege tanks after you've already won the fight. So, if they were positioned forward, I think that they could have done more to leverage the actual HP of his units and the other tanks that were dying in the front lines. Yeah, I agree with Neuro. I think that, and I agree with you as well. Maru is the type of player that can kind of sit back and macro really well. But I think in his comfort zone, he ideally throws the first punch, and according to how that goes, he will either turtle forever or keep the momentum going and close out the game. Whereas here, he wasn't able to throw the first punch. He just got hit every time. So yeah.
I got to go back and watch the game on Blackburn now that you've brought it up, Katz. You said you did an analysis stream of it, Katz, of the Blackburn game specifically?
No, I wasn't. I was just watching GSL and talking.
Okay. Nero, I wanted to ask you one question as well. If you're prepping for a big match, if you know your opponent, will you take off, will you remove your vetoes from ladder if you're preparing for that, just so you're ready for whatever happens? Or do you think there's a chance that Mario just had Blackburn vetoed and was like, fuck this, I'm never going to play it, who cares?
That would only factor in if it was the last map, right? Or if he couldn't veto it. What did he veto?
Oh, no, it's a best of 7, so I'm not sure. I was just saying, when you're preparing for a match, do you find that you turn off your vetoes on the ladder to make sure you're getting a good experience with everything?
The thing with ladder vetoes is kind of tricky because sometimes you veto for all 3 matchups because you don't like the map overall, but for a single matchup, it could be really good. An example would be Romanticide. For a Zerg killing a turtling Skytoss player, it is a huge pain in the ass. But against Terran, it's a very good map. Against Bio-Terran, it's some of the most fun games that you can have. So for a best of 7, or if I'm playing in a tournament against a Terran, I won't veto Romanticide, but if I'm trying to push rank on my main account, I will veto that map for the ZVP.
Makes total sense. Okay.
Man. I went over and I looked through the different win rates for each of the matchups on the maps. It's pretty interesting. There are quite a few maps that are really, really good for ZVT. I was watching the Muslim stream, actually, and he was really hyped about where ZVT is as a matchup overall across your ladder games. So I think this series might be maybe less representative of how fun it is to play. I feel like ZVT is really cool. I enjoy it a lot.
Definitely, I agree.
Yeah, that's a great matchup.
It's my favorite matchup. I gotta be careful not to be too biased, but that's the one from the days of StarCraft Brood War, where I love ZVT just for the amazing nostalgia I get. But actually playing it, it's good to hear that it feels good to play right now, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the Hive Tech, it feels like you can do pretty much everything. You can use Broodlords on certain maps right now, like Beckett or whatever. It's a pretty short rush and there are a lot of cliffs. So doing a quick Broodlord play, it feels pretty strong. Some maps that are more open, like Blackburn, if you've killed the rocks, Ultras, Rock and Roll, they have so much room to work with. And then Lurkers are in a pretty good spot too. So it feels like you're not really cornered into any one strategy. You can do a bunch of different stuff to suit your play style or your opponent.
You can clearly do roaches too.
You can 1-1 roaches, yeah.
Apparently, yeah. Works just as well
every day.
I ran into that problem. I was hosting a Protoss finals, and I was like, oh, if Protoss is in such a good spot, they could open Stargate, go double Stargate, Twilight Council, Robo, whatever they want to do. And then I think it was Mana, and he went double Stargate, Void Rays, 7 games in a row or something. And I was just like, oh, man.
There was an amazing clip of that was all the times that Kat said Void Rays, like crammed into 2 minutes. So good.
Oh, yeah.
With Nate, right? With Nate.
Yes, yes.
It was the what was it? It was the in February, the 3-Winged Angel finals against E-Laser.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun finals, though. I enjoyed it. Like, even though it was the same strategy over and over, it was different games. Like, they developed differently, I think, and they went longer. But yeah, like, I mean, we definitely said Void Rays a whole lot of times.
It was cool because in that one, at least, we got to see E-Laser sort of adapting and adjusting to what he was doing. So he'd like see the build, and he's like, all right, maybe try something different on the other maps. And they sort of traded maps back and forth a bit. Very different to what we'd seen in the GSL finals. Florencio, any final thoughts on the GSL finals before we head into our next topic?
The map choices. I think it's more important to try to not have any vetoed maps, just to make sure you're understanding each map and the goods and the bads of it. Because I kind of think that gold map, I'm not sure which it was called, but that one's really not the best for Terran, for a Zerg to just macro up and get to that gold, because as it is, it's hard to get a third for a Terran player with the Zergs. So I kind of feel like it's still good
Blackbird?
to kind of
On Blackburn?
Is it Blackbird? Yeah. I kind of feel like that gold was easier to obtain for a Zerg player than a Terran player to reach to that.
Yeah, I would say it's easier for Zerg, but the problem against Terran is that they have the ranged units, and Hellions, so they can just run to the back of your gold and deny mining. Like Marwan.
They can either do a Hellion drive-by early, or they can do Marine tank timings, and they just set it up behind the base, and you can't get over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
where the debris in your way and the tanks can still fire onto the mineral line.
Or even just
I think that Mara would probably pick more of an aggressive style, just to keep that from happening, or try to keep that from being a useful tactic for a Zerg, and having to not have to worry about going over there too much to deny the gold. But I always think it's very important to kind of learn the different maps. And even though you have this like side where you don't want to lose the game, it still helps you develop in some degree by just trying to find other tactics to counter these kind of maps that you don't like. Because that's usually just what it is. Like, there's always some type of bias reason that you kind of don't want to do that. But to learn from something, it makes you a better player.
There's an interesting difference here, too, between us talking and Rogue, which is playing for fun and playing for personal development versus playing to win. And playing to win at any cost oftentimes means abusing whatever the most overpowered mechanic is. And as a professional, that's what you ought to do. You're not there to please the crowd and say, let me give the spectacle of the most beautiful macro game I've ever seen.
Show good games for your fans.
I want to win with as much brutality and speed as I physically can. And that's it.
True.
In this context and in the spirit of the question as well, I would say that it's not as relevant to most people to actually play all maps if they don't want to. Whereas for Rogue, if he's going to finals and winning them, then he would probably benefit from practicing all maps.
Fascinating. Yeah. Anybody last thoughts on the GSL? I don't know what else there's to talk about, but that's a really nice segue, Neurosurg, into sort of what's been going on right now in these high-level StarCraft 2 tournaments. So I think if you guys don't mind, we'll pop on to our next topic. If you want to watch the GSL finals, they should be available on the YouTube for Africa TV. Cast Bartosis and Tasteless at the wee small hours this morning or yesterday, whenever it was. So with that, we're going to move to our next sort of segment, which is other big tournaments that have been going on the last couple weeks, which the finals of those tournaments have more or less followed a sort of similar narrative, a sort of similar storyline, starting first and foremost, Cats with the Champions Brawl, which was probably one of the better grand finals we've seen in the past 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, the whole tournament was super enjoyable for me. There were a lot of good games. My favorite, I think, would have to be Cyril Clem, I want to say, right? Like that was like the game 1 of Cyril Clem in that tournament in the semifinals was just absurd. but yeah, the finals was amazing as well. That was Beyond versus Clem, so 2 Terrans. We had 2 Zergs, 2 Protoss, 2 Terrans, all recent Premier event champions. And I've been getting into arguments on Reddit on what Premier events constitute or mean, or like just definitions in general, because people are saying that Clem hasn't won a Premier event, but he won the EU Masters, the most recent one actually. So yeah, that was awesome to see him solidify himself and kind of like win in a field of stacked up pros, including another 5 champions, all of whom have won championships against each other, like with Koreans and foreigners involved, right? So yeah, that was great.
So Florencio and Neuro, just to catch you guys up, Cats put on this big tournament a couple weeks ago with 6 major StarCraft 2 pros. We had two of each race, Bjorn and Clem. We had Cyril and Raynor, and then we had Trap and Zest. They had like a round robin group stage and then a playoffs and semifinals, and it was absolutely sick. And this is the only tournament that doesn't really fit into what we've been talking about, sort of, which is winning at any cost. Neuro, did you get a chance to catch any of the Champions Brawl a couple weeks ago?
I did not.
Florencio, did you?
No.
That's fine. No worries. The grand finals was Clem 4-2 over Bjorn. Cats, anything you want to say about the Champions Brawl before we sort of move on to our next thing?
No, it was super enjoyable, and I'm really happy that Clem won because, again, I think I think he was coming in as the underdog type thing into the tournament, seeing as the list of players is so ridiculous. So yeah, I was really happy to see him win and win in the fashion that he did. I mean, he 3-0 Cyril in the semis and then 4-2 Bjorn in the finals. So yeah, I would just say anyone that doubts Clem's skill is fucking stupid. And yeah.
It's especially a good win for Clem momentum wise, as we come into sort of like January, February, March has been sort of this, even April has been sort of this slow build where there haven't been as many big tournaments going on. And then come May, June, July, August, it's just big tournament after big tournament. It's DreamHack into the next, or DreamHack into TSL into like the next DreamHack. It's just from here on out, there's not going to be any shortage of these massive tournaments going on. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Clem does off the back of that win. I think it was a good win for him, just momentum-wise for his career. It was really cool. The other tournament I want to talk about really quickly before we get into our big discussion of the day, Cheese. The other one was the tournament that I put on just last week, which was the spring cleanup, where we saw a very similar grand finals to what we saw in actually the tournament I did in February, which was a best of 7, goes all the way to game 7, and the player who wins it does just insanely aggressive timing attacks, and I'm going to say the word that Cats hates here, but does cheese to win this thing. Max Pax took out Clem in the semifinals, and he laser in the grand finals, playing, I think, 1 standard game out of 13 games or whatever it was.
What kinds of builds was he doing?
Everything. It was disgusting. We saw Proxy Tempests. We saw some cannon rushes. We saw double Stargate Void Ray classic stuff. He did a Charge Lot Archon build against a laser that's not crazy, but a little uncommon. It's just all over the map. And I think the final game against Clem, so we played 4 games against Clem, was 2-2. And then game 5, I was like, oh, okay, he's going to go probably something a little more serious. It's game 5. There's a bunch of money on the line. Nope, it was a cannon rush into Proxy Tempest again in game 5. And he executed perfectly, and Clem just messed up his defenses a little bit. It was really surprising.
The first thing that comes to mind when you talk about taking another risk in a late game scenario, I'll never forget the chills I got when Classic goes for the DTs in the main. Like when everything is on the line right before his military, I think it was the semifinals for BlizzCon, and he risks it on such a ridiculous build that it's very far from standard. If there happens to be detection units in position, you're going to catch it and he's going to be way behind, but
It's over.
risking it for the biscuits, and it was super hype. I love that.
And that's exactly what you were saying earlier, Neuro, which is just playing to your strengths and these players brutally and efficiently winning whatever they can, which is a perfect transition into our next topic, which I want to spend the most time on today because I think it's the most academically interesting, and I don't think there's been a big discussion about it for quite some time. And it seems to be this I don't know, rise or popularity lately of just massively timing aggressive builds, that the community likes to call cheese. Florencio, you're probably one of our local experts on this. Florencio, when you hear somebody in the community talk about cheese, how do you personally define what cheese is?
Well, for me, cheese. I don't call it cheese. I call it creative strategy or real-time strategy or
Right.
special tactics, like Wildrose said. So cheese to me is just somebody that lost to creative play and is wanting to title somebody in a somewhat negative,
derogatory way. Sure.
Yeah, way. So, but I think a strategy is the way I do it is I try to find out the early game possibilities to mess a game up, because I'm trying to play the player, not necessarily the game. By putting them in stressful environments and putting them on an uncomfortable version where he has to think on the fly a little bit more than usual. So trying to figure those out, they do take a long time. But as you develop them, sometimes you run into one path and you find a couple other paths that you wouldn't have got there if you didn't try something different than the standard meta.
Okay. Katz, does that sort of track with, because I know, Katz, you also don't love the word cheese, I think. And I think you have your own definitions for what it is, but is that sort of what comes to mind for you when you talk about when the community talks about cheese? Is that similar to your definition?
Well, yeah, my definition is that everyone has a personal definition. That's why we're having this discussion in the first place, is because it's not a clear-cut concept, right? So when people say cheese, I ask, what do you mean by that? I'm fine talking about cheese or defining it in whichever way you want to define it, but different people have different ideas of what it means. So I just ask for a clarification. Usually when people say, "Oh, this was so cheesy," I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" Yeah, that's all words are good for, is to communicate ideas, right? So, yeah, I agree with most of what Florencio said there, and I think that I don't know, I think we have to work with a definition of cheese to, talk about what it is. I'm not willing to give one, so maybe Nuro is, since he was asking Twitter about it. Maybe the Twitter has a.
I have quite a few funny responses that I got for just people's opinions on what cheese is. Just to start this off, one thing that I wanted to talk about was the feeling of the word cheese and how you're saying it's derogatory and usually used as it's not a legit strategy. It requires a bunch of luck for it to work. I was thinking about that term and who uses that term. I use it to vent. If I can be fully honest, I'll call something a cheese, or I'll say this is a cheeser, because it just gives me something to say when I'm upset and I lose. It's not too nasty. But I do get rustled by stuff. I don't like losing to one-base stuff. It's not fun. It's not letting me play the game that I want to play, which is 80 drones. So that's just the human experience of me getting to vent something. And venting is okay, I think, as long as you're reasonable about it. Sure. And I was thinking about what's the opposite word of cheese for macro players like me who really want to have 4 to 5 bases. Standard. I was watching a Lambo video and he was saying, I decided to upload this game because it was a really good standard macro game. And when certain people hear that line, those words together, that's like ASMR for them, because they want the standard macro game and they feel like that's how StarCraft ought to be played in general. That all these one base builds and pressures and putting stuff on other people's side of the map, that is wrong. Not because it can't be done, but because you should not do that, because it should be defensible. And this goes back to a lot of what Idra's mindset was like. Back in early Wings of Liberty, he made a really big impression on how macro Zergs thought. I watched his stream a lot because he played macro games, and that's how I wanted to approach the game. And a lot of times he would say, because this build has a defense, no one should ever do this, because you should assume that your opponent is going to play perfectly, which is wrong. Humans mess up all the time. Sure. And I would say for a cheesy build to work, you need to either prevent them from knowing that you're doing it, so you're managing information in the game. You need to confuse them, put them in a situation they've never been in before, and with the mechanics of StarCraft being really fast, it's hard to think critically at the same time. So sometimes people will just see something in their base and freeze. I remember being a bronze player, and there was a cannon shooting my base, and I was completely confused as to what to do and how this happened to me. So you have the confusion factor, and then you have the mechanical factor of they can misclick. There are a lot of ZVZ attacks where if I don't have my queens hold position on the ramp, there was one time where I tried to get my drones to mineral walk through the queens and then hold position, but they ended up pushing the queens out of the way. So all the lings got into my base. So that would be an example of I saw the build, I saw the units, I was in position to defend, and I messed it up. So there are a bunch of different reasons why an early attack that people would call cheese can work and why it's legitimate. So I have respect for the hustle, for sure.
I kind of feel like on my side, there's a cheese versus the standard player, right? And then there's cheese versus a cheeser. And I feel that gets more dynamic because when you have a cheeser versus a cheeser, it's not just trying to get them off guard. It's, okay, I know you're doing this, so I'm going to do this. And now you have to do this, but then what do? I got to do something. I got to do other options. So you kind of have like more layers that you start learning because someone challenges you on what you're doing. And so it stops you, but then it slows you down because you're supposed to have more, advantage. But because of that, now you have to find a different type of advantage. And so does your opponent. And because it doesn't have this style of standard, you really don't know where the game might take you on both sides of the fence. And I think that's a really nice style of playing sometimes when I face creativity versus creativity versus standard. So that's.
I love it.
This is the.
Go ahead, Katz.
Yeah, I think at the heart of a lot of what Neuro said, I agree that there's definitely different approaches. Basically, where some players are, and this is something that is very related to the idea of cheese. Some players are more on the iterative side of things, and some players are more on what Florencio is calling the creative side of things. Now, I think that being creative, and Florencio has also alluded to this earlier, is being an explorer, sort of. So if you can think of it as roles for human beings, or like ants, for instance, there's usually an ant that goes at the front and is trying to find different pathfinder of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you were to explore a jungle, right? Like there would be a person that is most interested with actually finding different routes and different ways to the sea. And there might be a person that is always traveling the same path. Now, those two different types of people would have different advantages. The person that is actively exploring the jungle would have a better overall notion of what can be done, of what pathways you can cut through, of where to walk, where not to walk. Whereas the person walking the same path is gonna know the bear's fucking schedule and when he wakes up and when to avoid it, right? Because they will have walked the same path over and over. So they will be much more familiar, and that path will become much more efficient. And I think that is kind of what differences players who are creative in nature or explorative in nature versus players who are iterative, like Idra was. And you could see that in Idra, that whenever he ran into a bear that he hadn't seen before, he would just leave the game, right? Yeah. Like he would be like, oh, I don't know how to deal with it. And I would be watching and I'd be like, oh my God, this is so easy to deal with. But obviously I can't get to where Idra gets because he's much better than me at that point, right? Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to. I also would disagree with the notion that strategies in themselves, like aggressive strategies, should or shouldn't be defensible, because StarCraft is much more complex than that, in the sense that a cannon rush is stronger on Death Aura than it is on a different map, right? Because if you cannon rush on Death Aura, all of a sudden your first set of cannons on the high ground are already shooting the mineral line, whereas on a different map you would have to invest an extra set of cannons to reach the mineral line, and that's wasted investment, basically. So it's not so clear cut as cannon rushes shouldn't work, right? It's more of, are you playing the map? Like Florencio said, are you playing the opponent? And there should be more factors. Now, the game does get figured out as time goes on. I think it's one important thing to note is and I saw Florencio, and on this I disagree with Florencio. I saw you having a discussion with Raf on Twitter on this, on their because, and I also disagree with Raf. So I guess I'll propose both points to take off from the discussion. But Raf was basically saying that the state of the game does not allow for creative play, and Florencio was saying that the state of the game does allow for creative play. And the basis that Raf, go ahead, Creighton, I see you.
No, I'm trying to follow along because I'm very dumb. So I got to do visual like mime work to keep up with.
I'm sorry.
He's following the conversation.
I'm trying. Keep
All
going.
right. So
it's Rough and Florencio.
So basically, what Raf was saying is that the state of the game, by design, is not friendly towards creative players, which I don't think is true. And Florencio was saying that exactly that it is not true, right? But at the same time, Florencio was saying that you can be as basically, or implying that you can be as creative as you could have ever been. But that's also not true from my perspective, because the older the game gets, like for instance, if you devise a strategy today, then that is a strategy that you cannot devise tomorrow. And so where creatives thrive is in changing environments rather than by design the game is friendly towards creatives or not. If there is a changing environment in a patch, for example, or when there's a new expansion, or when there's new maps even, that's where creatives thrive, because creatives are going to explore. And when you explore, you find new pathways. And when you find new pathways, they become exploitable until they get figured out.
I would say there was a grain of truth in Ruff's line of thinking in that from Wings of Liberty to Legacy of the Void, it does reward mechanically strong players more than it used to.
Game design or just the aging of the game that naturally...
Right, exactly, yeah.
It's partly map design, because as the maps get larger, it incentivizes people's like 4-base management more. When in Wings of Liberty, your opponent is so close up that the stabbing happens much faster.
That is true. That is true to some degree. Like there were very small maps in Wings of Liberty, for instance. But I think strategically there is a wide berth. I mean, we were discussing how you can do anything in CVT, for example. But can you do anything that hasn't been done in CVT? Probably not, right? So whereas when the game is brand new, can you do anything that hasn't been done? Yeah, you just have to do anything, and it hasn't been done.
I think about a lot of the creativity from like a macro seat where you do have the big drum count and you do have maybe your standard upgrades of melee and carapace. Like the way that you can attack an opponent of sending an overseer in to direct their gaze into the main and then baneling dropping a base or doing a run by at the same time. Like those kind of combo attacks, I see that as like the colors that exist where there's an infinite variety and there's always something between two that you can kind of mix together to create something. So maybe the opener is standard. Maybe I take my lair at 430 and a second gas. But if I try an attack from two sides in a new way, that's creativity from a macro player standpoint. So I don't think creativity has to necessarily be outside of a standard macro composition, but it can be.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking definitions here. So if you want to define creativity as something sporadic or unrehearsed, then that works. But it might be rehearsed for someone else. It might be that, like, is it creative if I am copying that thing that you did and I do it every game? Not anymore, right?
Correct.
So that's in your view, because so I feel like I'm back in undergrad in my art appreciation class, where I'm learning about all the different ways you can assess art. You know, you look at it from all these different lenses that you talk about in discussion. Katz, right now, it looks like your lens is sort of between creativity and more not standard, but like creativity and more focused, concerted play. If that's accurate, where would you draw the line then between a player who's just very, very creative and a player who's would be called cheesy by like in the general discussion that people use the word cheese?
Well, I think everyone's a mix, right? Like everyone's always a mix. Like things in life aren't really like
right. It's like a spectrum.
Yeah. So even creative players like Max Pax, we were talking about how he did different things throughout his series. But in the series against the Laser, he also used adepts like 3 or 4 games, right? And he used them in very similar fashion.
Yeah.
So even though Max Pax will bring his own flair, or Bly will bring his own flair, and to the untrained eye or to not Bly, it'll seem like it's fucking crazy and he's doing anything and he's unpredictable because he's actively changing that. He's also got an iterative process by which he's perfecting those strategies. He's doing them over and over, basically. So MaxPax would be very familiar with everything that he did. And like Florencio mentioned earlier, he would basically be gravitating towards taking the game to a chaotic state where his opponents are not familiar with what's going on. But chaos on one level is order on a different level or to a different person. Right. That is to say, Bly or myself or Florencio or TLO or whichever creative you want to consider in StarCraft 2 would be more comfortable in the chaotic situations because they have seen them enough to them that's order. Does that make sense? Like you would be familiar with the things that can happen more than your opponent.
Yeah. When it's inside of your locus of control, that feels much more stable than something that's being thrust upon you. And sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
I think that's true, but I also think that creativity takes wisdom and intelligence. And to say everybody's creative or for everybody to think that everybody's creative is to lose the meaning of creativity in itself. The fact that we have creativity as a definition means that there's some that are creative and see things differently, and there's some that just don't. And so when you have a creative player versus a mechanical player that understands at least something that creative players do, they still won't have the same mindset throughout the game to understand the creativity because the creativity comes real time. It just happens that a lot of times you learn these pathways along the way and you understand it until that point, but then your creativity has to go further into the next part. And to just kind of go off of what, the rough thing on the topic, I kind of feel like I like what Kat said about the ants. There's some ants that go and scout and find different channels, different places. And I think there's mechanical players that understand how to create a meta, and then there's creativity where they understand ways that you can exploit situations. And with creative players, it helps those who aren't as creative, but are creative, understand those concepts and kind of run with it so that instead of looking at it as a personal perspective where I feel like, oh, I'm going to be good because I'm cheesing, I look at it as the more player base that are creative and unpredictable, the more the standard player has to be non-standard, because standard only works in a sense sometimes by understanding that the players are somewhat predictable, so they can go with that. That's why a lot of people don't like random players. Like, what's your race? I feel like the more people are creative in the latter games, the more it's going to break this mentality of what standard really means, because standard's only something you can feel like you can control. When you have this player going mass void rates, this person's going mass DTs, this one's going mass mutas, you're really going to be at like, well, I don't have any actual solid understanding that this player is going to play standard. So how am I going to play this one now? And so you start losing the standard a little bit, I feel, as players get diverse. And I do feel like there's a player that can have the best mechanics, but also creativity. And if you put them together, it's better than the person that just has mechanics.
Yeah, so see, from my perspective, that's not a thing that would happen or maybe it can happen over infinite time. Right. Simply because the iterator is, a person that has done Nero, what's the quote of the 1,000 kicks or something? There's a quote for
I fear not the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times.
Yeah, so the creative is doing the 1,000 kicks, and the iterator is doing the same kick over and over. And there's always an in between because, like Nero, do you play the same strategy every game? No. So even though you are not the most creative or as creative as, say, Florencio, you would say that you do diversify.
I flex to my opponents, and I have certain people who I open differently against them because I know what their strong suit is. And so I try to play a counter style.
Mm-hmm. And Florencio, even though you like to play different styles, do you play games that open similarly, that look similarly? Do you employ the same strategies?
Yes. I try to I try to get well-rounded. I try to be
so it's always a mix. That's what I'm proposing.
Uncomfortable. Yeah, trying to be uncomfortable. That's my biggest goal.
So it's not binary. It's not like you're creative and Neuro's not creative. It's more like
Right.
you're more of an explorer, Neuro's more of an iterator.
Right, but they're both creativity. It's just the way one artist paints a portrait and another one paints a portrait. They're going to be slightly different techniques, but they're both creative.
Is anybody on the panel familiar with Bortles' taxonomy of player types? Does that ring a bell for anybody?
I don't know. What's that?
Oh, it's cool. I think it sort of underpins the discussion we're having right now. There was a researcher in the late 90s who developed like 4 different types of players of games, like 4 different experiences that people look for in games. And you guys, like Cats, you're talking about like the iterators and the creators and stuff. Those are two of the different types of players of games. One who is literally called an explorer, and one who's called a killer. And I feel like we're talking sort of about these 2 different types of players, and each style has something. Each style has like their own version of what would be like an early aggressive creative strategy, just in sort of different ways. There are couple different ways to look at it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Poker has similar names for the player archetypes who are sitting at the table and how you can respond to them and kind of what they're going for and how to counter them.
What are those names, Neuro, so I can look it up later?
I came into StarCraft from poker. So my strategy in StarCraft, my approach to the game is the same as my approach to poker, which I play solid. There are different archetypes. Solid means you try to play in the least exploitable way, which means if you're against an aggressive opponent, you play for value. Aggressive would be another archetype, or hyper aggressive. That kind of person is bullying people with bets. Money is intimidating. So when you put a lot of money on the table, other people have to assess, can I really afford this bet? Is it worth it for me?
Right.
And one of the other archetypes would be a nit, or also known as a mouse, someone who plays super, super safe all the time. They take almost no risk. And if they do bet against you, they have something extremely good. Another one would be a whale, which not to shit on dentists, it's a dentist at the table who doesn't know anything about poker but has a lot of money. So that's the kind of person who you can harvest a lot of value from just because they make consistent small mistakes pretty much every hand.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you would say an eagle would be a person at the table who is extremely good. And the only reason you would fight against them regularly is for ego. And it's usually minus expected value to just get involved with them because you're investing a ton of brain power in probably breaking even or getting beaten by them. Maybe you can beat them and that would make you feel good about yourself, but it's not good for your bottom line. And then another one would be a jackal. A jackal is someone who runs their mouth constantly, just trying to tilt you and upset you. So that has been a really useful tool for me. When someone's BMing me, I say, oh, it's a jackal. Like this is part of their strategy. And it's technically legal as long as you're not breaking TOS or something.
Right.
But yeah, you can do that. And that's an edge that some people will try to take.
Neuro, is there a version of cheese in professional poker? Or what somebody might call cheese in professional poker? Like just doing a stupid bet to throw off your opponent or something like that?
Kind of. One thing that people do is they do what's called balancing your range, which is they'll play a garbage hand as though it's a super good hand. And it makes them really hard to read. You see this more so in World Series of Poker than in like an online small stakes game. In online small stakes, usually you just want to play straight up and for value. Because if you're against an opponent who doesn't know how to read a play and then make assumptions, you can't fake them out. You can't do a pump fake to someone who doesn't know that you're going to throw a pass.
You're gonna pump fake. Yeah.
They just look at it and they're like, okay, that's fine. And a lot of people get upset.
It's like dropping a forward pylon, like you're faking a cannon rush, and then they just don't it.
And they don't react. They're like, I don't know that I'm supposed to pull drones against this. So yeah, at like World Series of Poker, you'll see people get a hand like 5-6 or something, and they'll bet it pretty hard as though they had queens or aces or something. So that when they do have queens or aces, the person's second guessing of, is this legit value or are they balancing their range against me? I don't really know unless we show cards at the end.
Interesting.
And that's something that I try to do. If I play a best of 3, I'll mix in a 14-14 just for some lings to sweep my opponent's natural. They take the CC on the low ground a lot of the time. Yeah. And people will assume I go hatch first because I usually do on ladder. And that's just a way to keep them on their guard in the early game so they don't get too comfortable. Sometimes you'll get Terrans who open 3 CC with only 2 Hellions and stuff. So being aware of when people are playing that counter style against you. So I know my table image is a drone heavy player. If they start to get overly greedy, then I'll mix in an attack kind of thing.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Cats.
No, I was gonna say I'm glad you brought that up because initially, and I wanted to go back to that. You were talking about how there's like a playstyle that's like solid, or that like Idra was saying this shouldn't work or something like that. But if you are playing a style that accounts for all things, then that in itself is exploitable, like you've just described, right? Like for example, when I play against you on ladder with my Terran, I know I'm much worse, but I know that the chances that you cheese me are low because you are that type of player.
Sure.
And yeah. So it's like I'm like, I try to get away with as much greed as possible to try to sneak a win that I shouldn't get, right? And so I think that's important to highlight because it's never so straightforward as this shouldn't work. It should work, right? Like, and that's why you see players like Cyril and players like Clement and Koreans since the beginning, right? Like Koreans, because they come from Brood War, have understood always that they have to mix it up. So Koreans have always been cheesy, have always been kind of random. Europeans or Americans have been always the most chaotic for whatever reason. And Europeans have always been the most uptight for whatever reason. Like the three environments develop differently, where Korea is kind of a mix, and Europe has always been a little bit more on the reserved side of things, and North America on the crazy side of things, you could say. So, but now Europeans, the top of the European scene for the last 2 years or more, has begun to adapt. Like Cyril has done proxy hatching, and he had, even though he had that table image of being very solid macro, and even in his interviews, I remember in an interview, he would say stuff like, "No, me and Sugeliang in the Nation Wars, we're gonna play macro and we're gonna win with macro." Right, and that's good enough until it's not good enough because it becomes exploitable. And Koreans have always understood that because they come from Brood War that they have been playing for 20 years.
I think whenever I see Raynor versus Cyril, it reminds me of the upstart or the up-and-coming fighter who plays really wild and risky against the standard god. Cyril is kind of like the standard Zerg god, where he macros so powerfully and so well, and whenever someone else is facing off against him, they try to play asymmetrically because they don't want to play against the Cyril Burrow Roach stuff. That's just horrible. Right. No one ever beats him at that. Right. So you'll see Raynor going for like Ling Lurker, and then people ask me in chat after Raynor did that, and they're like, "What do you think about Ling Lurker in CVZ?" And for your common ladder player, you'll get decked by Roach timings and stuff, but he knows so much about his opponent that he's willing to like roll the dice, and it's a good roll. And this connects to the bigger question of risk, because a lot of times I think cheese, the more someone would call something cheese, the more risk is involved. The less risk is involved, the more they would call it standard. But risk is a part of war. And if I can give some Texas history to the class, our state independence was won off a cheese.
Say more, Neuro.
People have heard of the Alamo. Remember the Alamo. It's Santa Ana. He's attacking in. There are a bunch of people who are squatting in this mission, basically. I'm not saying who's a hero and who's a villain in any of this. It's war.
You're the worst American ever, Neuro.
I haven't had enough propaganda, I guess.
Come on.
They're holed up in the mission, and they're slowly getting surrounded, and they're getting killed. They're turtling on their last base, and they lose. Yeah. And then Sam Houston and some other of the generals of the Texas Freedom, whatever, independence, they're getting all fired up and jazzed up and thinking about how can we beat the Mexican army, because the Mexican army is more numerous and they're better equipped. They have more guns and more people, more cannons, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. How do you win? Well, you think about a weakness in the Mexican military, which is they take naps. They take siestas in the middle of the day because it's really hot and nasty. And if you've ever been in Texas, you know it's awful. So they're having a siesta, and the Texas Army just jumps them when they're asleep. That's not a symmetric, let's all march out in our lines. The two generals on the horses are looking off at each other, and there's the people who go and they meet in the center and try to negotiate terms, and then they say, no terms, fuck you. And then they go and they ascend in the first lines, and they do this kind of predictable symmetric warfare.
Right.
They cheesed them, straight up cheesed the win. And they killed Santa Ana and took a lot of the generals and everything, and then controlled the conflict. So it's legit. Like, it's a part of what has happened in strategy and war. So in StarCraft, to be mad at cheese is like, you're mad that people take opportunities historically in combat. You're mad that people do what they can to win, which it seems misplaced.
That leads us perfectly into our next point on the agenda, which is, why do people care? and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think the answer is as widely varied as whatever's in your head. But Nero, you bring up a great point. Anytime one of these games happens, like during if you read the chat during any, which I don't recommend, during any grand finals where anything unorthodox happens, people lose their minds and they're like, oh, this is cheesy bullshit. He's not the best. Like I remember when Max Pax beat Clem and then he laser, all the threads were lit up with, oh, sure, he won, but he's not the best player because he used bad strategies and it doesn't count or whatever. Florencio, maybe you have more firsthand experience with this. What is it about this that riles people up so much?
I think, well, for one, I've always looked at StarCraft based on what is called real-time strategy game, RTS game. I saw that the way it is. It's a real-time strategy game. But at the same time, I do know that there's players that do want a specific goal, and their goal is to get to the top. And I in some games, oh shoot. He's off. In some games,
just Florencio, before you go on, what's your dog's name?
Dexter. His name's Dexter.
Fabulous dog name. Go on. I apologize. Yeah. Just had to know.
Like I do feel like there's a sense of like community that does like to get to the very top, and it's very quick and sharp as possible. And in some games, I look at that as speedrunners. There's players that speed run a game and they don't worry about the enjoyment of the game in a sense of like the way others do. Their enjoyment is to win the game, to get the prize at the end, whatever that is for them. And some people it's MMR, some people it's to get to the highest location. But I feel like with cheese, it's we all want to see something different, especially as a viewer. I want to see something different, or I want to see chaos, but I want to see it from a player that's really good, because I like to do that, but I'm not good. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to see somebody that does go to that side, and I'll follow them because I would love to do that. I don't have the skill, but I could do it by watching that person. And I think by like looking at all the YouTube videos, most of the time that's on the games that come out on YouTube are the cheese games, because that's what everybody wants to see.
Right.
And yeah, it could be good to be a pro gamer and be very strict to your ways to get to the top. And I feel like because it's the money involved, it affects the enjoyment of the entertainment, because instead of it being diverse with all the best players doing their own styles and making all their skills work in very different levels, I feel because they stick to the more standard way, the viewers look at it as, I know exactly what he's doing. He did this over and over again, and he's going to do it again. And so the viewer base kind of gets a little, they already seen it. It's like watching an episode 30, 40 times. I know what it's going to happen. I can cast it blindfolded, some people say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of feel like the cheese, even though it's a high risk reward, like like Neural said, but I feel like it's important too to have that, because it's the adventures that you have. It's the adventures that you share to your friends, or you share to your, it's like, oh, like the poker game. Usually the poker game that you hear about from your friend is the poker game that you mind gamed them, and you had a bad card, like you said, and some kind of, and you just want to share that. I think that's what I love about StarCraft. I know I take a little hit on the fact that it takes longer to do what creativity needs to get up to the top, and there's a lot of failure for it. So you have to learn how to mentally accept failure and accept that it takes time to be able to like develop these. But I think overall it's something that is appreciated whether you fail or you win, because it's something different. And as long as you're trying to improve, that will show in time. And I think it's rewarding.
There's a lot of, pardon me, there's a lot of really cool, you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of really cool research in especially the domain of marketing, where when you put on like an event, people don't remember everything from the event equally. They remember how they felt during two different times. They don't care how they felt any other time during the event, but they remember what they felt when they were the most excited during the event. and they remember how they felt at the end of the event. So if you're running like a perfect esports event or something, you really don't care what happens in between. You want to make sure there's one really exciting peak, and then you want to make sure the end is really good as well. That's why TOs care so much about their grand finals and stuff. But you said exactly that, Florencio, is that like, I think the cheese hits so strongly because people have such a strong emotional response.
A few little brain science terms here. The reason we remember stuff earlier in the action would be called primacy. The reason you remember the last thing, that's called recency. And then the most exciting moment is emotional salience. That's the most emotionally salient moment. It connected with our feelings at that time. An example that pops into my head is whenever the room got really hot whenever Cyril was in the grand finals at BlizzCon.
I thought you were talking about the movie from The Room for a minute. And I was like, oh, it's been hot for ages, man. What are you talking about?
All the Overwatch and Hearthstone people and everyone was like coming over and crowding in. And that's like where all the energy was in seeing those finals.
Thank you for, like, Neuro, I feel like you probably would have done better in my degree than I did, because I've forgotten all of those terms. Primacy, recency, and emotional salience. Cool. I love it. One final thought on cheese before we move on, I think, to our probably time for our Patreon questions. We've been going for about 2 hours now. Can't keep you guys all day. One last thing I wanted to ask is, Katz, I know you as sort of like a very mechanically oriented guy. Like you have a deep understanding of the mechanics of StarCraft. And I wanted to ask you specifically, what does StarCraft do really well as a game that helps sort of insulate Bronze League players against just egregious cheese? I mean, they still get hit with it really hard. But what is it that keeps them from being just overwhelmed completely?
It's the first action, right? Like cheeser, or like or the person that acts first has a certain advantage because the other player has to adapt. So if you have no experience adapting to anything, which you would assume of the worst bronze in the world that's playing their first game,
sure,
then you're probably gonna have to travel through that path to then adapt and then figure out what you should be doing or what you could have done better. Watch replays, or even just in the game take mental notes of what you could have done better. So the reason that happens is because cheese or aggression will happen first, right? So you're basically tripping at the first place that you could trip.
forged
in the flames of shitty North American strategies from the very beginning, right?
In poker, that's called the edge of initiative. And it's basically putting your opponent at a decision that they didn't realize they were going to have to make. So if a person wants to go hatch, cast, pool, then they're going to have to take a pretty abrupt turn when they see cannon, shield battery.
I call that controlled chaos.
Yeah. You're playing a different game at that point. I'm not getting to play hatch, cast, pool, hatch. I'm playing hatch, cast, pool. Shit, my hatch is dying. I'm getting a second gas going for a lair, and I'm getting a nidus and taking my business elsewhere. And viewers love to see those games too. So if they removed all the cannon rushes and all the cheeses, I would be kind of disappointed. There was a formative experience for me back when I was in a clan called GGK in Heart of the Swarm. I was basically the worst Masters player in the world. Where it was right after they widened Masters to be like the top 9% or 7% or something. So a bunch of diamonds got in, and I was one of those. And we had a Protoss in the clan named All In Porsche, and he was a Korean guy. And he would cannon rush people, and a lot of people in the clan hated him for that. They were like, I can't believe you would do this to a clanmate. Like,
come on.
We're on the same team, man.
We were
brothers. He would cannon rush them nonetheless. And he cannon rushed me, and he beat me. And I said, wow, you're really good at that. And he said, do you want to practice it? Sure. So we just drilled him cannon rushing me over and over and over again to the point where he was a high Masters player. And if I had a fellow low Masters Protoss cannon rush me, I would just slap it. So me defending Parting's cannon rush that one time was largely off the back of me just embracing that as part of the game and saying, okay, time to go to work and do some drills. Because if you do the drills in the cannon scenario, you can get to a point where you may have defended a particular scenario more than the attacker has even tried it.
That's pretty funny.
We see that in Korea all the time, right? Anytime a Korean tries a cannon rush, generically, it's hilariously ineffective because they don't drill it as much as EU players and North American players do.
Especially North American players, I would say. Like whenever I get cannon rush, that's got to be my best win rate of all possible strategies. Is like, please cannon rush me, because I've been cannon rushed so freaking much, like by Deezer and Combat X and In Control, like over and over and over and over again. So So I'm very comfortable against Cannon Rush. Whereas a person that may not have seen a Cannon Rush before, like Nuro said, it's pretty rough.
Like we need to reinforce that more than to say cheese is bad. It's more like, hey, just get good at the cheese so you can, be on top of that player that does cheese. So it just needs to be looked at differently.
Make cheese a part of your regular diet is what you're saying.
Pretty much, like Neural said, all it needs is a little practice, and it becomes no longer a cheese and more like free wins.
There's a point that we maybe should have started with here, which is what is the objective of a StarCraft 2 match?
Oh, sure.
And that is to destroy your opponent's final building or get them to tap out. So a lot of people go into the match with the expectation that you're on the quest for the most beautiful macro game that's ever been played. And that's what your ideal scenario is, versus what is the actual win condition here. And the format of 1v1 military command and economy management is inherently stressful. Like they're most of the time frustrating you out of the game where you feel like you have been defeated and have no chance of winning. That's not a pleasant experience. And in addition to that, you've put in 5 minutes to 30 minutes or more of work. And the way I've described it is it's kind of like you put in the effort to mow the lawn, but if you didn't mow it well enough, it pops back up taller than it was when you started. Because your MMR went down. So you feel like you've taken a step backwards as a player, just on an emotional level. You didn't because you trained, but that's how people feel. And I think that's where a lot of the anger for getting cheesed comes from, or losing to some attack that you don't understand is, I put in so much effort and I feel like I could beat you in a macro game, but you didn't give me one, and I'm upset because I don't think that I'm worse than you. That's their attitude that they come at it with.
Yeah. I think another thing to mention is from the beginning, and I've touched on this, but not really quite like this. I guess in a new game, creatives will thrive, and that's what we saw at the start of StarCraft 2. So if you look at all the early GSL champions, they all played their own style. They all had, like, Nesty was incredibly creative. Nesty was a failed Brood War pro who played 2v2 because he couldn't cut it in 1v1. And everyone thought Nesty was brilliant. He would come with the coolest strategies all the time, and he would feed them to his teammates. But he just couldn't cut it mechanically because Nesty was an explorer, right? And so, again, an explorer gains an advantage early in that they attain more breadth of knowledge because they are actively looking at different pathways. Now, StarCraft, 10 years later, is an iterator's game, primarily. So, to touch on Florencio's point earlier about like the pros pursuing money or stuff like that, and that's why they don't develop their own strategies for fun. I think it's more that the game being the age that it is and being less and less changing makes it so that players who are iterative by nature will continue to thrive because they're always getting better. Whereas the creatives are actively exploring, but there's less and less to explore. So I think that's what we've seen mostly at the top. And that's why it's refreshing to see players like Max Pax and Raynor, who are a little bit more chaotic, but they're not as chaotic as Nesty, or as chaotic as TLO, or as chaotic as the players that would have tried, crazy shit at the start of the game. Or, like, for example, I feel like my strongest points were at the beginning of Wings of Liberty and at the beginning of Heart of the Swarm. At the very beginning of Heart of the Swarm, I made it to the finals of a day 9 tournament that was like king of the beta. So in the beta of Heart of the Swarm was when I was strongest. And I lost, I think, 2-3 to Morrow. And that's because the game shifted completely to where I already had developed understandings, but I could get to exploring before other people got to exploring. I got to abusing and to using things. But the longer the game goes, the more iterative it becomes. And I think that attracts a certain subset of players more than it attracts others as well. There's people that don't like change and people who like change. Again, everything happens within a range, so it's not like it's not like any given person is like, oh, I only like change or I only like non-change, right? It's somewhere in between always for everyone. But I realized this working at Blizzard, or with Blizzard, at Blizzard, fair to say. I was going on walks with developers, and there was a person that had a very square personality. He was very change averse, and he said he quit StarCraft as soon as Heart of the Swarm came out, which was the opposite effect that it had on me, right? For him, it was like, don't change anything because I'm uncomfortable with that shit. So I think that the players that continue to play are more leaning towards, lesser change, basically, lesser amounts of change, and that's why you see iterators thriving at the top, is because they're the best suited for the job.
I feel that's true, but I also feel like you gotta look at the base of the audience as well that like to play and don't have the time to get to that level. And I feel like if we look at those, they're a wider part of StarCraft in regards to what makes a company want to create an RTS game or even think of another RTS games, because we have a viewer base that's actually able to pretty much gain them that kind of business to say, hey, we're going to build it because they want it. And if we look at that base and say, hey, if we can kind of also nurture you guys in giving you guys ways to enjoy the game in your own ways with your own friends or family, I feel like there's going to be more interest for them to tell their other friends and say, hey, this game is fun, come play it. And we should have both, where the more we accept that, the more people will come into the community and the more enjoyment we'll have to be able to get another RTS game or, have a bigger base. But when we say that this game is only for it's going to get figured out to a point where it's only good for those who are very strategic, standard, and I'm not standard in a bad way, but standard in regards to this is the pathway that is the way. There's people that aren't going to have that dimension because it takes so long to really gather all that it's still going to keep this base so diverse that it's way fun for anybody that's in there. Bronze level,
There's also a hybrid state, right? Which is what Nesty was occupying, and a place that I occupied a lot. And when I was good at the game, basically, there's players who are not creative who will take strategies from creative players. So for example, I've given strategies to Sue for him to beat Cest in a GSL semifinals. I've given strategies to Solar that he's used in the GSL. I've given strategies to DRG, to Jadong that he used at BlizzCon. I've given strategies to Elaser that he used to qualify to BlizzCon. So a lot of these players don't like to think more linearly, but will abuse a developed idea from someone else. So you see hybrids like that as well, right? So I think that's important to highlight. It's not like it's going to become super monotone ever. Because there's still
wasn't there I'm thinking of one build that you passed along that involved maybe mining through some minerals with drones and hitting a timing.
That one was funny. That one was on a new map. See, that one's a brand new map, and I abused it. And then I had a 90% win rate on the ladder, so I gave that build to Lambo and Elaser. They both liked it. Lambo didn't use it. Then I told Elaser, if you use it, you're gonna win. If you use it, you're gonna win. And he used it, and he qualified for BlizzCon against Drogo on the back of it, and his own gameplay after. And then that build got used. This was funny because the next Nation Wars, that same build was used by 3 or 4 different people, 3 or 4 different Zergs. So by the time I got to playing on that map against Haas, the build was so figured out, but I had no idea because I hadn't been watching the matches. And then when I watched the cast, it was basically I thought Katz was creative, but he's just doing the same shit as everyone else. And I was like, fuck you. Yeah. And I lost because the adaptation that Protoss players came up with was to wall that part with to put their first pylon down next to those minerals, which is not something that you would ever think about if you hadn't died to it or seen people die to it constantly, right? So they did that, and then they walled off with a Stargate or something there. Yeah.
Actually, I think I use your build with the drone pool, but I actually I clump them in one drone so they all look the same. So if they scout it, it's not 3 drones running or 4 drones.
Nice.
So I kind of try to figure out how to keep them from catching it.
Were you the first one who did that with the probe?
Yeah.
Stack them all up on one?
And then also I do that to branch out when I go to the cliff. I go up the ramp and then go make a hidden hatchery or
Yeah, that's good.
So-
I think that. Yeah.
People ask me what is all in. That is as all in as you can get physically. Every single drone is sent.
Oh,
People
to be
say
honest,
all
it's
in
not
for a
all
lot of
in.
different stuff. It's
This
not
probe
all in.
represents- Yeah, no, this probe represents the next generation. So what happens is you do it to really mess up the game very bad to the point where even though you're gonna lose those units, you try to like get that advantage by continuing making workers behind it, and at least get some type of some macro base. So you go, but you kind of have some minerals on the side.
How many probes at home?
Sometimes just one, sometimes two. It really depends on the build.
So this is like a pre-Stone Age level of
Uh,
development here.
Yeah,
It's old school as it could possibly get, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
fellas,
just a different outlook. Yeah.
I could listen to you guys talk about strategies and builds literally all day. So I'll tell Cobra get us all back on another Pylon show very soon, and we can have another show to showcase your wrinkle brains. For now, I think we're so far off of our original topic, cheese, and I think we've just about said all we can say in a couple hours here. So I think if it's all right with you guys, we'll move on now.
Let's start on cheese, because you did ask a question,
Yes.
which was why do people get so bothered? I think
Yes.
that primarily is ego, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just it's just shielding their ego. I
Ego.
think that's the short answer.
It's heavy to admit that you got outplayed, especially if it's in a way that you would not play yourself, because that puts the responsibility of the loss on yourself. And it's harder than saying the game design is wrong, the balance of Protoss is wrong, and you are wrong for attacking me with those things, and you should feel ashamed and go take a shower.
Last on game design. I'm sorry. You said
No,
the
it's
game
fine.
design activated, but another thing about the iterative nature of StarCraft versus the explorative nature is David Kim from the beginning intended, and the game was a boxed product that intended to be sold and then not profit, right? It was adapted to profit later, like in Legacy of the Void by Tim Morton's team and whatnot, but initially it was not. So it had, the 3 stages, basically Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm, and Legacy of the Void, and those were the stages at which Blizzard would profit. And so the philosophy of David Kim as a game designer, whether that be influenced by this or by his own philosophy of game design, was always to get StarCraft to a stable point where it didn't need changes. And he called that mastery, which is very appropriate because mastery is basically the epitome of iteration, right? Like it's beyond Reapers when he won. That's a man that's used Reapers too much for his own good, right? And if it's not changed, then that creates a gap between iterators and experts that have done the same thing like millions of times, and people who would struggle to catch up. And the older the game gets, the harder it would be to catch up, which is why you have players like Flash being dominant in Brood War throughout fucking forever, right?
For a decade now.
Yeah,
It's absurd. It's absurd. Thank you guys. That's obviously fantastic discussion. You guys all bring something really unique to the table, and you're all so good at explaining exactly your point of view. I really appreciate you guys stopping by to chat with us about what I think some people consider kind of a silly issue, but is genuinely it's sort of the root
This
of this
is a
game
fundamental
in
RTS
so many ways,
issue,
right? Yeah.
It's timeless. 10 years from now, people are going to talk about this conversation and what cheese is, because there will be more RTS games and there will be new cheeses that people will get very upset about and think that people ought not to do. But then there will be people still who create new kinds of cheese.
100%. I'm just so excited you guys are all here. Couldn't have asked for a better panel for today's discussion, for sure. Keeping in mind, we've now had a very serious discussion about strategy and what it is in our games. We're going to move on to something slightly less serious. It's time for the Patreon questions. I'm going to need you guys. I'm going to need a lot of help from Neuro, from Katz, and from Florencio here. I'm sure we've got some doozies this week. So let's hop on over to the priority Patreon questions. If you're a Patreon of the Pylon Show, you can submit a question every week to ask normally Artosis and the crew to respond to. We're going to hop in this week. The first 2 questions that were submitted, by the way, are very Artosis specific. So we're going to go ahead and skip those, and we'll let Artie get to them next week. And we're going to go on to some of the most important issues of the day, starting with Hyper Turtle, who says, like many people on the internet, I am a bald guy. And like many of those bald guys, I want to stream StarCraft content. How, as a bald guy, how do I appear on webcam without the overhead light reflecting off my exposed scalp like an unheavenly halo? And I think this is perfect because we've got Neuro on. Neuro, if you want to talk a little bit about what that's like.
Was this a forehead joke or a long hair joke?
You just have the most hair of all of us.
So lighting, you want to think about where it's coming from. So my lighting setup right now, just for a random piece of info, I have 2 lights on either side of me. So I'm being lit side to side. That's for the look of just, you need to be better lit if you're in front of a green screen. And the other one is it saves me eye fatigue of having lights directly in my face. I had that before where there was a light right next to my monitor, and about 7 hours into stream, your eyes start to hurt. So I think self-care is probably the most important foundation to have with your lighting situation. And then you want to think about, what is my look? How do I find the best possible lighting for myself? And it's kind of like its own game of skill. There are people who do lighting professionally. There's a lot of nuance and detail to it if you want to min-max it. But yeah, you have to, I think, first of all, you have to embrace the meme of how you look. Because if you stream or if you make content, people are going to meme about how you look. So you should try to find a way to own that and make that like your jam.
100%. Yeah. As the resident bald guy, I will say side light, backlight, no overheads because it will shine. You got to think of the light like a billiard ball. It's going to hit your head and bounce like exactly at a 90-degree angle every time. So side lights and backlights, and nothing like, don't have a dark room and then bright lights because then it's just going to shine off. And most importantly, as a bald guy, get a face wash. Keep your oils low because if you don't like strip the oils from your face, it's going to be even shinier.
I know Creighton can't see the stream right now, but I'm sorry. I need to apologize in advance for what I'm doing on screen.
Oh God, I'm a couple seconds behind.
We have a Creighton head for a planet.
Right. My moon head appearing. I recall that was a fun day. It was a fun day. Our next question from some drunk Canadian, the legendary tournament organizer, asks us, oh man, this is going to be a good one. I want all of you to think of your answer here. We'll go one by one, starting with Florencio. If you were a sentient chunk of cheese, which type of cheese would you be and why? And then how would you like to be served? Sending much love from the land of vegan cheese and IPAs and hipsters, Canada. Florencio, what kind of cheese and how would you be served?
Okay, so the type of cheese I would be is donkey cheese because it's for the hardest, most expensive cheese out there to make, and I'll have it served in the sewers.
An excellent answer. Very on brand. I love it. Cats.
I'll be. I'm not sure. It's so difficult. I really struggle to choose stuff like this. Like usually when I go shopping, I just like browse forever. So, and I always get different stuff. Like I'm an explorer too. So like to lock me in, I guess I would be like a 4 cheese bag, like one of those 4 cheese Mexican cheese.
Like the pre-shredded stuff.
Pre-shredded, yeah. So that, so that there's a little bit of everything. How would I be served? And you can do anything with that, I think. Anyway, it's fine.
Yeah. Very diverse. I like it. And Neuro.
Pepper jack, final answer. Sliced on a toasted sandwich with hummus, spicy hummus, baby spinach, turkey breast.
I love it. I would eat you.
I'm starving. That sounds incredible, Neuro. Excellent choice. I was thinking about this earlier. I think I'd like to be Parmesan because like it's really nutty and sharp and just it's a great cheese. And how would I be served? It doesn't matter. Parmesan goes in literally everything. That's why
you would always
so
like a little
useful.
bit more.
Yeah, exactly. It's so useful. Everybody loves it. Nobody's ever like, oh, no Parmesan, please. What kind of monster goes to Olive Garden and it's like, no, that's plenty. Just keep it coming, man. Keep it coming.
Well, keep it coming, really? I feel like there is a threshold where you're like, okay, that's enough. No?
Nah.
Like once there's more Parmesan than pasta,
that's a problem, yeah.
You've gone pretty far.
Yeah. Okay.
Our next one comes from Polly. Which instrument could help to raise my APM? Guitar, obviously, piano. What else? Also different instruments for different races, like drums for Protoss. I want to get better in my mechanics, even when I'm not playing StarCraft. Possible. What do you guys think are other ways to do that? Oh, man. What a good question. Who's got a thought on this?
Sounds like piano is the way, right? Like, I don't know.
Piano is my way as well. you use both hands. So if you can learn how to use your mouse and your keyboard together, yeah, it works way better.
Violin,
Florencio
viola.
Florencio uses a mouse with keys on it, though. Is that why? Because of your piano influence?
Yeah. It's the piano influence. So I figured with my right hand I could play my melody,
Nice.
and then my left hand I could play my chords.
Yeah.
If I learn how to play them both at the same time, I could be more developed in speed than a normal mechanical player.
Hard disagree on that, but I love
know.
your approach.
Hard work, but optimistic.
Usually, I tell viewers that your APM will rise naturally as your game knowledge increases and you know what to do. And that's
That's
where
true.
the speed comes from. Because most people, it's not like you started playing StarCraft and then through honing your skills and laddering a bunch, your reflexes are now faster and you could do stuff faster because you're a faster human being. You're usually about the same speed that you started as, if not a little bit slower because of aging.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing what to do in any given moment creates a lot of what counts as speed, of just creating another action, because I went from one action immediately into the next one instead of getting one action thinking, what do I do here? And you have a pause, you float larva, you're not using your production, and then you start moving again. For me, viola is what I play.
Viola.
And that I like because it's like keyboard and mouse, where the left hand, you're pressing down like keys on the keyboard, and your right hand you're moving up and down, so it's kind of like the mouse moves, and you don't have like different notes that you're hitting with the bow aside from directing it to the strings.
That's really nice. I love that.
Yeah,
That's cool. I'll say don't play trumpet, because I suck at everything and I can only use 3 fingers ever. So I got like my mouse hand is figured out, and then when you play trumpet, your left hand is literally just still the entire time. So it's the worst choice at all. Cats, any thoughts on instruments, or are we good to move on to the next one?
I just on Neuro's point, I think that's really the way to look at it. The more you do something, the more it becomes muscle memory effectively, so you don't have to think about it. And you can test this by seeing how fast you can, say, build workers versus anything else, because we all build a lot of workers, right? So we're pretty quick to press SD if you play Zerg. And you don't have to think what is the key for selecting units and what is the key for drones. Usually, if you're a silver player, you just press SD when you want to make workers. And if you're one of the best in the world, you don't even think about making workers. You think about your strategy, and the workers make themselves because it's just in your process. So even if you look at the highest level of players, and to the argument of iteration earlier, like sometimes players like Laser, and we were talking about this during the tournament where he was playing Max Packs too, like in an interview, he's been asked before, what were you thinking in this moment? And he's like, I wasn't thinking of anything. You know,
he was in a flow state, and you don't think when you're in a flow state.
Autopilot, yeah.
And you don't have to think about anything because it's all already kind of grinding.
Brain's doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a second half to that question that I thought was interesting. We kind of skipped over. I want to get better in my mechanics, even when I'm not playing StarCraft. Is that possible? Neuro, your answer earlier seemed to suggest not really.
Yes, actually.
Oh, hit me.
Sleep 8 hours a night.
Good answer.
That's the main trick. The other one would be being hydrated and fed before you play, because StarCraft is very taxing. And fun brain science fact, the brain consumes 20% of your daily calorie intake, but is only 2% of your body mass. So it's a hungry organ, and you have to use it a lot playing this game. So taking care of your body has pretty major dividends for mechanical speed and accuracy. I can feel it in myself. If I slept for 6 hours, I misclick way more. I unbind stuff. I don't have my macro hatch hotkey. Like a lot of different mechanical things just fall off if you're not in good physical form. So yeah, if you can't play a ton of StarCraft, then just be really good to your body and give yourself the best chance you can.
That's great, man. That's really good.
Mindset, I always tell my viewers that if you have a hobby and you feel like you're good at it and you've been doing good at it, try to use the way you learned how you got better at that hobby and apply that to StarCraft. Because when you do a hobby, you love to do it, and when you love to do something, it's not work, and you do more of it and you get better at it. So that's one way to look at how to get better at StarCraft. Just how did you get good at what you're good at now?
It's because like discipline is a straight up skill. Like it's a muscle that you build over time, right? So if you've got discipline in learning whatever your hobby is, it sort of naturally connects. That's great.
You can relate that to StarCraft, yeah.
Good stuff, guys. Our next one, Neo Steel Enthusiast, of course. What's your favorite 3 cheese blend? Pick one from each race. So your favorite cheese, which we just, whatever, your favorite unorthodox timing strategy from Terran, Protoss, and Zerg. Neuro, you want to start?
I'm thinking kind of along the lines of which ones make for the really fun games.
That's what I'm thinking, like, which one do I want to see, like, in a tournament? I'm like, oh, fuck, yeah, he's doing something wild.
Versus Protoss, it's like a 99% chance that I'm going to put the game on YouTube if they do a cannon shield battery into Robo Rush at my natural, and I Nidus out, take a different base on the map, and then end up with a Muta switch versus Stalker Colossus Prison running around. That every time that happens, if I win, it feels so good that it's worth all the other times that it doesn't end up working out for me. And it's so entertaining for the viewers too. So that makes really, really good games every time. Props to people like Prinef who do that every time. Turkey Dano just beat me like the last 8 times. He does the Stalker one, which I think is less fun, but that's probably my Protoss one. And then from Zerg, my favorite cheese, I think a good just like hatch gas pool going for a Baneling all in, that creates sometimes some consistent micro over time where both players have enough drone count that they can keep stabbing at each other over time and then one person falls over. That's like the knife fight in a phone booth kind of thing. And whenever the matchup gets very heavy Roach versus Roach, I kind of miss the Ling Bane. I like that aspect of unit control. The units are also fast and explosive. And then Terran cheese, the first thing that popped into my head is Ruff goes 2 base BC and he doesn't take his third. And when I can beat it, it's nice. When I lose, it's really sad. But it's definitely a spicy lasagna.
Good choices. Those are choice. Cats, you got anything better than that?
I don't know if better. I'd say that for the most part, I enjoy personally playing cheeses whenever it's one of the first times that I'm doing it and it works, because that's rewarding as hell. But otherwise, I have with Zerg, I have a lot of affection for proxy hatching, because I feel like I was one of the first people to consistently proxy hatch successfully at a high level. But even when you say something like proxy hatching, it's important to note that there is very many different ways to approach proxy hatching. So my proxy hatches are very different than Bly's proxy hatches, and whatever follow-ups and whatever timings, and like whether you do it off of a single hatchery at home or 2 or so when I say proxy hatch, I mean maybe most specifically in CVT 3 hatch before pool with a hatchery at my opponent's natural, blocking it, and then playing a macro game from there. And I liked mostly gasless. Cyril did something very similar just last year, but he started taking a gas a little bit earlier than I did, for example. So even though it was a very similar concept, he would take the gas earlier because that's how he felt more comfortable. Then I don't know. And as Protoss, I don't know that I have a favorite. Oh yeah, I have a really cool cheese actually as Protoss. So in PvT, this is the cheese that I like doing is I proxy my first barracks, and then I make a Reaper from that barracks. Behind it, I go 2 gas very fast, make a factory back at home to make a Cyclone in time for whatever counterattack. So the Reaper's just keeping them busy on their side.
Right.
Then with the SCV that made the barracks, I make a starport when the factory is finished, somewhere else on the map, but close to them. And I pump out Cloak Banshees. And then as soon as the Reaper pops up, the barracks lifts off and it flies into their main. So I call that my Chaos build. And it's pretty successful at the level that I was playing. Like if I needed a go-to build to try to take a game off of someone better than me, that's what I would do. So then at the main, I made like 4 Marines, because 4 Marines 2-shot probes. So if they don't scout my 4 Marines, so first they have to deal with the Reaper, then they have to deal with 4 Marines. If they push out, I have a Cyclone. If they don't push out, I move out with my Cyclone. And then eventually I have 2 Cloak Banshees that show up at the same time. So it's a very layered, nice strategy. And it's so proactive from the beginning that it's very easy to execute it over and over because my opponent can't act faster usually than a proxy barracks, than the first proxy barracks. So I like that one. And for Protoss, shit, I don't know. What is there, like, should I say a standard build for Protoss?
yeah.
Because that's the
Stargate Void Ray.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I feel like every Protoss cheese is like Protoss is the tech race, right? So
Right.
So I feel like they have the most tech options, and therefore they always keep you guessing, and that's why people hate losing to Protoss, is because everything feels like cheesy, like this, like it's relying on the elements of the game that rely on the missing information and concealing it. So DTs, I guess, I don't know. I hate DTs.
Yeah, don't we all?
Let's see. For my Protoss, of course, it's gonna be Nexus Rush.
Yeah,
I have different ones, but my favorite was Nexus Rush, where I had it at the bottom and I recalled at the top. They removed that. So that was one of my favorites. Now I do a Nexus Rush with battery shields at the bottom, and I recall. I had 4 adepts while I'm getting warp gate, and then once I get the warp gate, I make stalkers between that. So the adepts take care of the battery shields take care of my adepts, and then I just wait for the probe to make a pylon with the Nexus that I have in there. And then I just kind of go from there, make battery shields, and attack with my stalkers that are warped in. Because a Nexus is like a gateway. You can warp in fast as long as the pylon's next to a Nexus.
And it gives you a lot of supply.
Yeah, it gives you supply. For my Zerg, I like to do a early gas with a drone to the natural, make a hatchery. Wait for the Zealot to go over there with some probes, cancel it, go to his base, and make a hatchery at the corner of his base. By that time, my burrow upgrade is done. The Zealots are attacking, and I cancel and burrow in real quick. And then they think it's gone, and then they leave, and then I go back up and make the hatchery and go for a timing attack. For my Terran...
I think that's in the Geneva Convention somewhere where you're not allowed to do that.
It's the Diglett drone. It's a little Pokemon build.
Yeah, for my Terran, one of my favorites is I go 2 base, double stargates, double starport with battle cruisers, and I get a hidden base by their base. And then what I do is I get into my Neosteel armor, and then I make enough workers there to fill up this Neosteel armor, and I put them on auto repair, and I float them over like a medevac. And then when my BCs get there, they're just repairing and then picking up, repairing, picking up, repairing, picking up. And so then the BCs don't get killed so easily because the medevac's like going with it. I mean, the command center is going with it and dropping the SCVs again because they can load down quick and pick them up. And if the SCVs get hit, when you pick them up, they repair each other inside. So it's a funny tactic that.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Florencio, you have a video about that somewhere, right? Like, I'm gonna go check that.
Yeah. The Florencio files. So I have Pig casts the Florencio files, and that's what this shirt is. And it's on YouTube. It's like 250 or 230 episodes. So quite fun.
Damn,
like creativity.
That's dumb, and I love it so much. Oh my god, that's amazing. I'm obviously not quite as talented player as you guys are. From a viewing standpoint, some of my favorites. I'm sort of reaching back into the archives, but I still wish that players were bad enough that a ghost nuke rush would still work these days. Like, there's nothing more exciting for me than a nuke at 4 minutes to just make somebody tap out.
It can. I've seen Ruff do it to someone on his stream. So basically, he ran a bunch of cyclones to the natural to get them to pull a bunch of their workers somewhere else, and he had the nuke lined up to where they were going to pull their stuff. So it was like an anticipated tactical nuke off of one base. Yeah, it was a one base all in with the ghost and some cyclones. The cyclones were just like bait and a distraction. It wasn't even part of how he intended to kill his opponent. It was the nuke. It can still be done. There are nuke gods on the ladder.
God, that'd be glorious.
JW is a friend of mine. He raids in our WoW guild. He's a diamond player, but like his whole game plan is how many times can I nuke my opponent? And he doesn't focus on the like iteration of macro fundamentals of getting that third CC really fast, he's usually behind, and then his opponent gets really overconfident and ahead, and they attack, and he knows where to put the nukes, and they lose their army, and they rage at him. It's content. It's good.
Oh, that sounds delightful. That's one of my favorites from, I was going to say
Yeah,
from back in
really-
the day, but if you can pull it off, that's amazing.
It really comes down to what you mean by can you pull it off, right? Could Raf pull that off against Rogue? Probably not, right? Yeah, so
That's so cool. Oh, I'll leave it there, and we'll move on to our final question of the day from our very own Alessander, who helps curate our show notes every week. And Alessander asks our final question. I don't often see cheese versus cheese. How does that work for you? Very open-ended question. A few years ago, Flash wrote about how he develops new strategies by seeing a momentary weakness and finding a way to exploit it. Is it similar for you? Are you creating in the zone on the fly? And then just favorite story, which is very, very broad. Why don't I assign one of these to each of you guys? Neuro, how often do you see cheese versus cheese? How often does it work out for you? Cats,
You're asking the wrong person for the cheese question.
Florencio, you don't often see cheese versus cheese. How does that work for you, buddy? Good point. Cats, a few years ago, Flash wrote about how he developed strategies. Do you ever develop strategies on the fly, or are you like always got something up your sleeve? And then Neuro, just favorite story. That doesn't specify StarCraft or like in real life or a joke you heard once, but I'll leave it open to you what you want to prep. We'll start with Florencio. How often does cheese versus cheese work out for you, buddy?
For
Appropriate
me,
graphic on the screen.
cheese versus cheese for me actually works out more times than most if it's cheese versus cheese, because my brain picks up all these different strategies and diversions that the game goes, where because I let my brain do all the work and I don't tell it to just copy a build order or copy this person or wait for this person to tell you the answer, my brain has to figure all this out. And because it's always trying to figure out the answers, sometimes I have dreams or daydreams of things that I could do, and I try it on ladder. And then sometimes it does it on real time, which is I'm in the game and it's saying, do this. Okay, let's try it. So it's up to you to do it. You have the thought. You either do it or you don't do it. I always do it. I go, okay, well, let's try it. Let's figure it out. So it helps me develop a more dynamic tactic or thought process of what I think is possible versus just, oh, I did the cheese. Now let me go take a base now and kind of macro. Instead, I kind of just keep going with it and go, what's the next craziest thing I could turn it into? And then also still keep the resources going. So more times than most, I come up with strategies. Some of them are on the fly.
Florencio, do you experience the Tetris effect in real life? Like, do you like see cheese happening in your day to day just because your brain's so used to it?
I study psychology, so it's kind of like in my world of always trying to understand what the brain's capable of and how to really utilize it in your, in every which way that you could. And that's one thing I learned is if your brain is stressed out, you're gonna have less chances of your learnings to be long-term memories, because stress hinders your long-term memory.
Sure.
So if I stress my player out and he's stressing himself out, it's not going to work for him. But if I'm always in a calm state, I retain the information more than most people. I guess I'm calm.
Okay, I love it. That makes so much sense. Cats. Flash wrote about how he develops new strategies by seeing a momentary weakness and finding a way to exploit it. Is it similar for you, or are you creating on the fly?
So yeah, it's both. Like Florencia was pointing to, I think that conscious attention is a little bit overrated, in the sense that I think it if I'm not mistaken, it is much less of the processing that your brain overall does. Like I believe that most of the processing is subconscious.
Sure.
So I think if you're just trying shit out and seeing where it lands, and then aid that process with your conscious attention to try and like kind of figure out how to like take a step further, like Florencia was mentioning, like how to iterate on that, then you can stumble on shit. And when you stumble on shit and then you're actively trying to figure out, you can figure out stuff on the fly. But you can also just think about stuff or repeat a process that you thought was successful to see what flaws it may have and then try to solve for those. I have a similar approach to Florencio in the sense that I never liked copying other people or learning how other people figure out the game. And I think that makes it so that you develop your own understandings And with that comes somewhat of a unique play style, because
Sure.
if you see, for example, if I the example I would use is if I was watching Serral actively and studying Serral to try to understand what he's doing, it would make sense. And if it makes sense, then your brain's gonna, have it solved. It's so if you have a solution already, it's much more difficult to come up with your own solutions. So I think the creative process has to be partly unadulterated by having as little input as possible from other sources. And the less input you have, the more creative you become.
Perfect summation. Thank you, Katz. And finally, Neurozerg, favorite story, which is about as broad of a prompt as I think I've ever given a guest in my life. Do you have a favorite story, Neurozerg, about just anything?
I can share a quick origin story that connects poker to StarCraft a little bit, and
hit me.
Getting your ego destroyed. So I had really good grades growing up, university early, bunch of like big plus marks. So young kid thinking you're hot shit, basically.
Sure.
Do WoW Arena, get Gladiator, which is kind of like getting GM-ish by the percentile.
Wait, what class were you when you were Gladiator?
Rogue. We played Rogue Warlock 2v2.
Nice. That a boy. Okay, go on.
So I'll be striving for that again in BC, by the way. Side note.
Excellent.
But I heard from a friend, poker is a game of skill, and there's a lot of mindset and psychology and being successful. And I was a cognitive science major, and I took judgment and decision making in a bunch of other different classes, and I learned about all the different cognitive bias that we have that a lot of the time serve us well to survive in an environment of natural selection. But when it comes to mathematics and really advanced decision making, we make predictable mistakes.
Sure.
So my friend says, well, what about going for poker? Because you could use that, like the gamer skill and your competitive fire, with the mindset and understanding of all this. So he bankrolls me like $200 so I can play in the micro stakes, which it's really tiny amounts of money. You're playing for pennies every hand. It's almost nothing. But I loaded up the account and I got set up in Canada, and I'm at a little cafe on my laptop fighting for pennies with other people in poker and feeling like it's really cool. Like I made it across the border, got this all set up, and I'm playing poker. And over the course of like the next 6 hours there, I lost everything that I had on those tables that I put in that account up to that point. And I was so soul crushed. And I wondered to myself, like, is this the most unlucky thing ever? Am I bad? Am I doing something wrong? And I was so sad. I went to bed at maybe, 4:30 p.m. The sun hadn't even gone down yet. I was just so crushed. And I resolved that in the morning, I will not play. I will read. I'll go to the forums and I'll look and I'll see how are they talking about hands and stuff. And I get onto the 2+2 forums. I didn't even understand a third of the words they were using. And I realized I was so supremely dumb and foolish and ignorant of this vast space of a game that I hadn't even begun to acquire even the first piece of skill. So after that was like a massive slap in the face to me for talent is shit. Like talent doesn't get you anywhere. If anyone wants to be excellent, you're going to have to work a ton, and you can't change what your talent is anyway. So if you really want to approach something like StarCraft, you should approach it with an immense humility that you are a tiny practitioner in a vast landscape with like Flash, like gods who have been playing this game for so long, and they know the game like the best violinist in the world knows the violin. And if you want to put forth the work, you've got to put forth the work. And I got into StarCraft, and people had the audacity to say that someone got lucky. And I had played poker for 3 years at this point, and I said, you don't know the first thing about luck. There's no luck in this situation at all. You fucked up. And there's some ideal response to pretty much every situation. Maybe it's new, and maybe you didn't know what the response should have been, but you have the replay right there, and you can just watch it right now. And then go look and say, what was my first mistake? What was my second mistake? What was my third mistake? And get some of this shit right here. And you write it down, and then you read it later. This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way. Neuro, thank you so much for your thoughtful response to all our questions today. Neuro, if people love you, where can they find more of you? What are you up to these days?
So twitch.tv/Neuro would be the main bread and butter of where I am and what I do. youtube.com/sleeve/neurozerg. That's the YouTube channel, probably the second most likely place that you can find me. My biggest ship recently for the StarCraft folk here is a video I did on tilt. And this is actually the opposite of what we were talking about today. This is me getting tilted against turtling Skytoss players. So they're not going for early attacks, but I'll have the kind of game where maybe I doubled my opponent's APM. I had 3 more bases than them. I had more upgrade spending, more of the map over time, and I can't kill them, and I lose. And it's really frustrating, and a lot of players will complain about losing to Turtle Mech, losing to Turtle Skytoss. And I go through this, and I give an A and a B of your default emotional response to something, and then a more productive and constructive way to think about the same situation. So a lot of people will feel entitlement. You look at the APM at the end of the game. I had 320 APM. My Protoss opponent had 120. I should win, right? You feel that way. And those feelings are things that you can address, and you can redirect them to, okay, if I have map control, what is something I can do with that? You think about, instead of, I can't believe my opponent did this to me, you think, what can I do in this situation? And it becomes a constructive kind of learning process.
Sorry to interrupt. There's no better place to train your brain and get like the inside scoop on how to put yourself in the right position mentally than checking out Neuro's stuff, guys. Fantastic stuff. Neuro, it's a joy to have you on the channel today, on the Pylon Show. Thank you for joining us. Florencio, in addition to your incredible hat making skills, what else are you up to in the world of StarCraft 2?
I just organized a new set of hotkeys, and I'm really trying to get good at mechanics because I didn't do any mechanics. I got to a high level just with my tactics. So now I want to like be a little bit more well-rounded like always, but with Terran and Zerg, so that I could provide good content for the Florencio files. And I got Winter and Loco that cast my game sometimes, so I really want to like do really good for myself and for the people enjoying my way of playing. And I feel like by putting that hard work, I think both sides can be happy. So I'm at twitch.tv/FlorencioSC, and then my YouTube is just Florencio, which I try to put out pretty often, pretty frequently. So that's pretty much what I'm doing.
I love it. It's been a joy to have you on, not just for Dexter and the hats, but some really good insight on what makes cheese valuable and how people need to look at it.
I have a quick question for Florencio, though. Are you gonna then become more of a narrator if you're getting better at mechanics? Because it seems like switching races would be the worst way to get good at mechanics, right? It's like more exploring.
It's hard. Yeah, I'm not like I always said. I always go for the difficult things. So as a StarCraft player, I always wanted to be. My goal personally is to be the best player I can be, and the way I want it is to be able to utilize every unit in one game in the best possible way. I know it's not practical, but to have that goal always keeps me reaching to be able to like get the most diverse style in a game. And because of that, it's the mechanics is a part of it. The Zerg and the Terran, it's like, why do I want to not enjoy all the units in StarCraft? If I love StarCraft, I kind of thought about that. I was like, well, why do I just single out myself on one race? Why can't I just enjoy the Terrans, tanks, nukes? You got lurkers. So I kind of felt like it's a long road. If I look at it as a journey, it doesn't have to be felt like I have to do it so quickly. I feel like the journey is more important than the finish line.
The destination, yeah.
That's why I feel like it's worth doing what I do. It's harder, but I think at the end of the day, I'll have an overall development in myself in this game and better entertainment for everybody that likes Terran, Zerg, or Protoss.
Whoa. You're saying that you strive to have fun in the video game?
No, that's absurd.
Right? I know. I know.
Radical,
it's a little hard.
Yeah. Again, a topic for another Pylon show, I think, where we could spend about 2.5 hours talking about why people play StarCraft still. It's ridiculous. Beautiful. Finally, Florencio, again, a joy to have you on board. Thank you so much. And finally, Cats, what are you up to these days? You just cranked out a bunch of tournaments with me and on your own. What's next in the world of Cats?
Well, looking at my Twitter right there, that makes it easier. So I am doing a bunch of stuff. I'm playing StarCraft Monday through Friday, but also I have a podcast that is coming back soon. The next podcast is gonna feature Sabrina from season 8 of Hell's Kitchen. She's one of my favorite contestants ever. So I am super excited for that. I also have a new cryptocurrency launched through IO. So if you wanna support me and buy some of that, you can go to buylove.io. Love is my crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And with Love, you can ask Sabrina questions. And the next episode, I'm going to announce it right here, of my podcast after Sabrina, I've locked the next guest, but we don't have a date yet defined. It's going to be Carol Baskin. So that's going to be pretty sick too.
You're shitting me. No way.
Yeah. So I'm super excited for the podcast. It's really good. I think the first episode was with Dr. Alan Drummond.
Yeah,
who is a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology at UChicago and trained by Nobel Prize winner Frances Arnold. And we actually talk a lot about a lot of things that we've discussed today, about the subconscious, about the importance or the value of conscious attention and consciousness in general. And it's kind of a sciencey episode. It's a really fun conversation. The guy's incredibly intelligent. And then my episode 2 was actually with Artosis, and we talked about hard work versus talent. So I completely agree with Nuro on that. And if you want to check out more of that, I talked with Artosis on that on my second episode. My third episode is also with a scientist who is a leading researcher at Stanford for ALS. And and I got my next 2 episodes set up. So I'm super happy with that. You can check out my podcast at youtube.com/wearecats. And otherwise find me streaming most of every day on twitch.tv/rootcats.
Beautiful. Guys, if you've enjoyed this conversation at all, imagine how much better it would be without an idiot like me, like getting in the way of these guys' thoughts. Neuro, Cats.
What are you talking about, dude?
Come on. You guys, it's great. It's been a joy to have you guys all on. And again, if you're enjoying the conversation at all, check all these guys out on everything they're doing. Intelligent stuff. It's phenomenal.
It's good that you're humble. You have a really good voice, and you did an excellent job hosting.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm an event host and tournament organizer. I'm basically taking the month off though, so it's not worth me shilling any of my stuff. I streamed like 140 hours last month. I'm taking all of May to just live a little bit outside of the internet, which is going to be great. So if you like what I do, follow me wherever. But it's been an absolute joy, an honor to work with Neuro, Cats, and Florencio. Guys, thank you all so much. Next week, I can't announce exactly what's happening yet. I suspect we'll be back on Artosis's Twitch page with your normal host, Artosis, back again. Some potentially big mapping news happening next week. So keep your eyes on the Twitter. Follow the Pylon Show. Follow Artosis wherever you guys get all your news. Guys, you can get the Pylon Show as a podcast. It's usually out a couple days after this live event. Wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and drop the Pylon Show a follow. It's good to see Artosis project going on now for God knows about. Cobra, how many years has the Pylon Show been going now? Do you know off the top
It's
of your head?
usually over 2 years.
Over 2 years, which is a lot considering when the first episode came out, people were like, "Oh, it'll last for 3 episodes," like everything Artosis does. So we've blown through that goal at the very least.
It's got to be more than 2 years, no? It feels like longer than 2 years.
Well, this is
Well,
let's see.
Alessandro
This
might
is
actually
episode
know this.
126, so at least 2 years. If it happened every week, and I know we're taking a couple weeks off. Alessandro says over 3 in the chat.
Over 3 sounds more like it to me.
That feels more about right.
Yeah.
By the way, I know for everybody who's paying attention to the podcasts, sorry, that's too catchy a name, Cats, get the fuck out. We have a whole bunch of new subscription services here. We're now on iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Player FM, Stitcher, Deezer, etc. These are being updated right now, and I'm aware the last episode is not up on most of them, or any of them yet, but we are in the process of getting caught up and updating the back-end process, so those will be being shipped out shortly.
Cool. Cobra,
That's it
thank
for
you
me.
so much. Cobra, thanks for putting all this together. Our producer, of course, Cobra Venom. been keeping the Pylon Show going for 3 years now, and it's a hell of a thing to have such a tentpole show in the community, bringing us all together once a week to talk about the things that we love and why it's so important to us. On behalf of myself, on behalf of Artosis, on behalf of Neuro, Katz, and Florencia, everyone, thank you for joining us for the Pylon Show. Artosis will be back next week with even more fantastic StarCraft 2 content. Have a great evening, everybody.
GG.